to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. Thank you. Madam Clerk, can I have a roll call, please?
Chair Bybee.
Here.
Mayor Sheedy.
Here.
Mr. Squaga.
Here.
Mr. Chapman.
Here.
Ms. Keel.
Here.
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 Thank you, ma'am. Moving on to item B, comments from the floor. Public.
We do have to read this moment the first being donated.
By the board members. Speaking on behalf and in favor of the community for guidance. That. And also after. You have in front of you today is the opportunity to really what the limits is. When I was a sophomore, I had the opportunity to receive a track from Louisiana School. That was an old wooden economic impact made by our university being Collegiate East. It ultimately changed even into having a national class meet for real games. So certainly from the athletic side, being the on the outside, it was an old wood drum. Into this. So it's been a long time. So with that, what I would tell you is that they will. The room nights will surely exceed expectations. We will get to promote all the local amenities, attractions, and events, let alone the natural beauty and splendor of our area, makes them special. The expenditures proposed in this paper on the agenda for the categories, but it all adds up to will undoubtedly be improved. And long-term, use the economic benefit of the area. That's expectations. To think about the opportunities that happen each year, I can tell you the NCAA is looking for sites to host division one. Let alone just big time invitations with CTF. And again, speaking to the USATF. They will help economic impact as well as not just think about having NCAA championships. For the national championships, USATF, you have NBC Sports here. They will put something on TV. People will see what this area is all about. And what you can do to use those to promote the area.
Mr. Nelson, we're
By time up?
3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Next is Ms. Hannah Smith.
Hello everyone, my name is Hannah Smith. I have been on the Nevada track and field team since 2019. I just finished up my eligibility this last 2023 season. I'm here to provide insight from a student athlete's perspective as to how getting an indoor track would benefit our program greatly. The need for an indoor track is imperative, particularly when considering the unique challenges we face due to our local weather conditions. In all but a handful of days in March, my team had to train inside because of snow, rain, and cold temperatures. Without the ability to practice on an actual track year-round, we're often left to improvise with what facilities are available inside. Our athletes are running on a 20-yard turf strip, swimming and biking. While these practices are great for conditioning, they simply cannot replace the precise technical practice that an indoor track affords, as well as not having to worry about injury due to cold weather. It goes without saying that these conditions hinder progress and slow down the growth of our dedicated athletes, as it is near impossible to work on improving technique in such unpredictable weather. A lack of an indoor track puts us at a competitive disadvantage against other schools, particularly in the Mountain West Conference, because every other school either has nice weather year-round or a feasible indoor facility. An indoor track would level the playing field, providing athletes with equal opportunity to prepare, train, and compete, regardless of the weather. Without the ability to host outdoor track meets due to bleachers being built over our outdoor track, and our field event site being off campus, the ability to travel us indoor would benefit us greatly. Since the nearest indoor tracks in the country are in Washington, New Mexico, Colorado, and even Texas, we must take long trips every single week. These trips entail long hours on an airplane and missed practice, which puts a strain on our athletes both physically and academically. An indoor track would enable us to have home meets, saving our students both time and energy, and allowing them to better balance their academic and athletic commitments. Most importantly, an indoor track will provide a platform for our local community to support our athletes. Currently, the lack of home meets prevents family, friends, and fellow Nevada students from cheering on our athletes in person. We've missed out on countless memories, including senior days, not to mention the potential morale boost that comes from the community support. It's not just about enhancing our athletic program, it's about fostering a sense of community, pride, and unity. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Next, we have Miss Emily Clark.
Thank you, Emily. My name is Emily Clark. I'm a custom training state custom. I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. So growing up in Albuquerque, as you all may know, Albuquerque has a indoor track facility based in community. They had a huge impact. And so growing up, participating, Albuquerque would host community track meets every week. In January and February, the high school, middle school, even adult community would come together and participate in these low-key meets, but it would also bring in Texas, people from Colorado. There's just so few facilities in the area that having this opportunity was huge. So in addition to just community track meets, Albuquerque hosted, NCAA nationals, USATF nationals. So it bring people to Albuquerque who would not come to Albuquerque, saw this firsthand, and it was really cool to see professional runners run in our city. It's very neat that so I did my undergrad in Southern California. There's obviously not very many indoor tracks in Southern California, and as you all are all aware, there are very few indoor tracks even in the west coast of the country. So as we were trying to build an indoor season, it was really frustrating. We ended up flying out to Boston most days, from SoCal to Boston, just because there were so few options. Having another potentially driving range would have been really huge for us. We were Division III school, so we weren't able to go to UW, but just more options actually would be really huge. And then this past year, obviously, we had a really intense winter. Almost every week, we had really workouts around shoveling, just trying to clear one lane so we could get our workouts in. We traveled to Spokane, we traveled to Lubbock, traveled to Albuquerque. These are all pretty long trips, not enough full day just to compete. And as I mentioned, we're not able to host outdoor track meets here to the nutrition facility. So just the opportunity for team growth and community building, that being able to host a major championship like Mountain West or potentially Nationals here in Green, it would have a major impact on the Nevada track and our ability to grow and prosper. And yeah, so thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you. Do they want me? I'll close public comment, and I'm sorry, I didn't do a welcome. I just jumped. We've got a lot on the agenda today. And we have a big audience, you know, or maybe I should slow it down so we can keep you all here longer, because we're not used to having such a great audience here. Thank you all for being here, joining us this morning. We have a packed agenda with a lot of important decisions to be made today. And so the board has its work cut out, but some really exciting things that we're going to do today. So excited to have an audience here, to have people presenting for us today. And let's move this meeting, and we will try to move it at a really good clip to respect everybody's time and get the business done that we have on our agenda. So with that, I'll welcome Commissioner Gale, and we're going to go ahead and move on to item C, consent agenda. Yes.
I would like to recognize with a very special guest in the audience and the case of goodness. Sandoval's in the house. Thank you so much for being here and being such a massive supporter of our union. You've been great for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I was going to do some with you too. So I wouldn't ignore him, and he said, I know you said that.
So just in case you forget, I wanted to make sure we recognize it.
Yeah, because he and also Stephanie Went, the athletic director, you know, very pleased to have both of you here in the audience, and I do on my agenda, so I would not forget your promise. Okay, consent agenda. Looking for a motion. A motion by Mr. Murak to accept the consent agenda. I have a second by Ms. Shuby. No discussion. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any motion carries unanimously. Okay, presentations. All of the items under D are all on our indoor track, which is why most of you were here today. So I'm going to go ahead and we're going to have all three, D1, 2, and 3. I'm not going to come in and out of those agenda items. It's one broken into segments of presenters and information provided for the board. So with that, I'm going to ask Mr. Largetta to introduce who the presenters are in each segment of this, but we're going to go through all three of those items, and then look at the end of that would be just a decision. But if Mr. Largetta, could you please open up those items for me?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, members of the board. I want to give some opening remarks, if I may, before we proceed with the speakers that are here today. In response to the board's direction, the RSCVA, specifically the sales department, is constantly working to identify new business, increase occupancy in our facilities, target need dates, and of course, generate room nights. After 21 months of research, education, collaboration, communication, and teamwork between our internal team, finance, facility, and the sales teams, and the external partners you will hear from shortly, we have identified an opportunity with the potential purchase of a custom portable indoor running track. This world-class portable indoor Mondo track will generate national exposure, enhance local partnerships, create community engagement, produce room nights, increase facility revenues, and bolster our partnership with the University of Nevada. Our track will be one of only 4 indoor tracks in the entire Western United States, giving Reno Tahoe the ability to bid on unique opportunities not available to our competition. We appreciate your support and attention as we move through the following presentations. With that, I'm pleased to introduce the founder and CEO of Synergy Sports, Mr. Jason Boudry, who conducted our feasibility study. Jason.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks, Shelley, and members of the board. As Mike said, my name is Jason Boudry. I own Synergy Sports, and I've been working with RSCVA for the past year or so to put together a feasibility study to assess the business potential for a potential indoor track in Reno. And so before we get into a lot of the numbers, I want to give a very brief overview of indoor track as a sport. And then I'll let the track experts, Mr. Mansour and Mr. Page, really get into that as we go through this. But the indoor track season is a relatively short season. It runs from the end of March or the end of November and through March, which coincides with generally the least busy times for hospitality. The draw radius, what we call the amount of distance or time that a particular track meet can generate participants from, can regularly exceed 6 hours. As some of the student athletes mentioned in the public session, there are so few indoor tracks that are publicly available and open for college competition that student athletes are traveling 3, 4, 5, 6 hours or more, to compete. And so the main users are colleges and universities, and in recent years, that has expanded to local youth from a recreation standpoint to competitive youth, track teams, track clubs, AAU, USA Track and Field now have very large youth contingents to their programs. And as you get up in track meet level to the national level and even at the conference level, you can draw significant crowds, both participants and spectators. A recent event in Gainesville, Florida drew about 20,000 total spectators and participants from as far away as California, because the way the indoor track as a sport is set up, student athletes have to travel and they have to compete at these indoor tracks wherever they may be around the country. And so getting into some of the numbers, we expect through our assessment to generate roughly 45,000 annual visitors between November 15th and March 15th. That's broken down between 20,000 athletes, 25,000 spectators and parents, and does not include officials, coaches, media, support staff that are required to be present and be part of some of these events. In terms of number of meets, right there, we expect an average of around 7 total meets in year 1, ramping up to 14 by year 5, with the possibility of bidding on some of these NCAA conference and national championship meets. High school meets will ramp up, middle school meets will as well, and those will ultimately feed into some of the collegiate meets. Standpoint, again, as meets increase, visitors increase, room nights will increase from an initial 24,000 room nights expected in year 1, ramping up to over 50,000 room nights by year 5, with the hosting of a collegiate level championship meet. And so you can see this, the increase over the next several years. And so from a financial performance standpoint, through our assessment, an indoor track in Reno has the ability to generate sufficient revenue to support its own operating expenses through program revenues alone. So from an economic impact standpoint, we assess that it has the potential to generate around $40 million in total economic impact, with an annual net income of over $650,000 on average for the first 5 years in program revenue alone. So that does not include food and beverage, catering, gate, or parking fees. So what we were able to assess was the track is viable, it's feasible, it's needed in the area. There is not sufficient competition from Albuquerque or Spokane for the factors that we listed in our presentation. Right, there is sufficient college and youth athletes available. There's more amenities in Reno than there are in either of the other 2 cities. And the distance from Spokane makes it geographically not a viable competitor regionally. And so then finally, what we wanted to put together was a conceptual financial model showing the financial performance of the indoor track as it progresses through its initial 5 years. And so as you can see, it is profitable from year one. We've got the ability through kind of this next several month period to market the facility, to get letters of intent for track meets, and to really hit the ground running. So, if and when this project comes to fruition, there will already be a stable of track meets waiting to be held. And so that, leads to early years profit and cash flow. So we wanted to take just a quick minute to go through some of the business case, and then we'll be happy to stay on and answer any questions at the end. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Jason. I'm going to go ahead because there's so much material in the 3 segments, is to open it to questions per segment on what we just heard from Jason and from Synergy. Do I have questions while we have them on the line? And we'll go from there. Anyone with?
Madam Chair,
Mr. Murdoch.
if I may, what was the event in Gainesville?
So it was held at a new facility in the Alachua Sports and Event Center. As far as what level, I can find out for you. John may know this as well, but it was a collegiate event.
There's
Mr. Chapman.
one quick question on the track rental revenue on page 6. Can you give a little bit more background on where that revenue is generated? Is it generated partly within the local market, or is that all kind of out of market rental opportunity come into play?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a great question. So, and I'm happy to get into these numbers outside of this, but revenue, as you see it on page 6, is generated through different ways. Track meet revenue is kind of obvious. Track rental revenue is typically a collection of several different streams. It is the local market, right? Local track clubs, local universities, local colleges that want to use it. But again, I'll go back to that same point we made earlier. Because indoor tracks are so unique, you will get track rental revenue from out of market colleges and universities and track clubs that that they may choose to come once a week, twice a week during the track season, just so they have a true indoor track to run on. And so you'll get those revenues all the way up and down from local high schools, middle schools, track clubs, colleges and universities in market, and colleges and universities out of market.
Question?
Yes. And I don't know, maybe it's in here and I didn't see it. What is the comparison between the West Coast and the East Coast when it comes to programs, like collegiate programs or other, sort of running programs? What does that look like, the data between the East Coast and the West Coast?
Yeah, so I'm either John Mansour or Don Page from a track performance and what types of track meets are held on the East Coast and West Coast would be better to answer that. From a business standpoint, having an indoor track on the West Coast is a much better business model than it is on the East Coast. There are quite a few more indoor tracks on the East Coast that are vying for the same general market, if you will. So there's an indoor track in Chicago. There's one in Virginia Beach. There's one in Florida. Several of the colleges and universities that have indoor tracks through the Carolinas are opening them to the public for some of these youth indoor meets. We've just not seen that on the West Coast. And again, I think John and Don can speak more to the why behind that. But from a business standpoint, that's the reason behind that.
Mr. Murdoch.
Yeah, thanks, Madam Chair. Sponsorship and naming rights. What gives examples of who would be a sponsor for this or naming right opportunity, if you could?
I'm sorry, I missed part of that. You said who?
What it says sponsorships and naming rights. What who would you be selling the sponsorships or the naming rights to? What suggestions do you have, and what do they do on the East Coast, or what experience do you have in getting sponsorship rights for the?
Sure. So again, it's going to be dependent on the meet. It could be dependent on the season. It could be dependent on the event. So typically you'll have individual meet sponsors. So if there was going to be a meet held in, 1st of March, and it was a collegiate event, you may have local sponsors, you may have regional sponsors, you may have brand sponsors that sponsor just that particular track meet. You can get more of a partnership with larger national brands that would sponsor the entire season. And with that comes benefits. And we help some of our other clients, create some of those benefits. And it can vary from signage to non-physical benefits, more like digital assets, whether it's exposure on your website, social advertising, and then from there it can blossom into much bigger things for naming components within a track meet, or naming the event center itself when it comes to track. And so we'll get into some of the logistics of where the track is going to be and that sort of thing. But you could sponsor just a particular event. You could sponsor a general sponsorship that is more along the lines of a banner sponsor or a brand sponsor. And as people come in, they get their tickets, there's signage throughout, and it's a way to advertise, whether it's a local brand or a national brand.
Yeah, let me ask one more part of the question. Do you help us find a national sponsor?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Actually,
Mr. Twaga?
yes, and thank you, Mr. Boudry. Actually, while we're on the sponsorship too, I'm assuming some of the sponsorships, right, go with the event. It's the actual track meet, so to say, not necessarily the venue, or.
Correct. Yes, yeah. So like I said, you could have a naming rights sponsor for a particular event. So, the Coca-Cola, whatever, indoor track meet. And
I'm just assuming that goes though with the event producer, correct? Or would it?
so there's two things. There are managed events. And so that's where you would bring in an event organizer or a meet organizer. They will typically handle a lot of that stuff. You'll also have some of your own events where, Shelley and her team may coordinate a track meet. And so it could come with the meet or the meet organizer. It could also come as a venue sponsor. So the convention center could have its own cache of sponsors that tie in with a particular event.
Just two more questions. One, Mr. Boudry, if I could. You're showing in your financial model that year one, we're showing over $400,000 net income. By year 5, we're doubled it up to 8. What expense are you showing? It may be built in here for the track breakdown and assembly each time that we go into a new track season.
Yeah, so some of that is built into the direct costs under revenue. And again, I can share the spreadsheet that goes with this with you guys. But some of that is included in that direct cost. Some of this, as we made this financial model, was a bit ambiguous, not knowing what the final design proposal, logistics of what that storage and takedown setup partnership was going to look like. And so, as we get more of that information and as we get more from the revenue side, these numbers will become more and more streamlined and more accurate.
Thank you. And then just quickly with Mike and Shelley, as far as booking, I think we kind of touched on the sponsorship discussion, but where does that responsibility fall? Is it RSCVA? Is it a consultant? How do we access these groups?
So again, Mike Clarietta for the record. So if I'm understanding your question, Mr. Squag, is who actually books the meets itself? That would be,
relationships.
that would be Shelley and her team. Obviously through her relationships and Mr. Mansour and his connections, especially on the West Coast, we would handle the actual booking process just like we do for any group.
Ms. Silver?
Yes, Madam Chair. Jason, thank you for all this information. I have a question. Do some of these track arenas, are they typically open to the public who pay to run? I mean, I'm a runner. I would love to pay to run an indoor track in the winter. In tracks
So-
around the country?
Yes, yes, no, and maybe, right? I mean, it's a, that'll be a decision. So in general, yes, they can be open to the public. Obviously, the more the public runs on it, the more wear and tear you're gonna have. And you've got a different set of logistical considerations that have to be made versus just having a model that is rental only, where access is much more easily controlled. And as you'll hear from Don Page here in a little bit, if you're not a fairly well-versed runner, an indoor track, because of its banking, can be a bit overwhelming. So you don't want, you know, moms and dads and strollers and toddlers and things like that. We do have some clients that sell a membership, and it's conditional. Right, so it's either somebody with a local organization, it's you know, it's somebody who used to be a runner, who is a runner. They don't allow kids, they don't allow, you know, strollers and dogs and things like that. So yes, it can be done. I think it just needs some thinking through on whether or not it should be done.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Chatham?
Just, I don't know if this is appropriate at this part of the presentation, but what's the lifespan of the track?
Yeah, Don will cover that a little bit later, so I don't want to get to the end of the story too soon. But the longevity is well over 10 years.
Okay, we'll kind of try to wrap up. Go ahead, Mr. Murray.
East Coast versus West Coast is, you said there's tracks out east, bigger population, more colleges. Will there still be, what's gonna be the opportunity on the West Coast? I mean, is it comparable or make sure we get?
Yeah, so I think, again, John can speak more from the you know, track performance standpoint and some of the reach of this. But, you know, similar to, I think everybody had a concern or has a concern about, well, are we going to do this since Albuquerque has one? As you get more of those dotted across the West Coast, there's going to be less and less groups, whether it's, you know, CVAs or CVVs or private groups that are going to want to enter that market, because there gets to be more and more of those. And so I think, again, you guys are in the catbird seat a little bit, where you've got the ability to capitalize on your space, on a market that's, you know, fairly untapped, to realize potential for, you know, pretty significant profit and economic impact. And you don't have a lot of other markets that can very easily compete, given all of the things that Reno has to offer, in addition to having an indoor track. And that's why you just don't see a lot of those, you know, popping up all over the place, right? They're expensive to build. If you don't already have a convention center, now you're having to build a building big enough with the amenities, right? So some of these standalone buildings that are indoor track facilities are, you know, 70, 80, 90, 100,000 square feet minimum. And so as you go into some of these major markets, it becomes harder and harder to get that sort of land or building, or, you know, on and on and on from there.
I want to go ahead and move on to the next segment of our presentation. And I'd like to introduce our next speakers, if I may, unless, do you have something more to say before we bring them up?
I wanted to thank Jason, and just a note for the board. Jason is based in Charlotte, North Carolina, and he would have been here today, but he attended his daughter's high school graduation this morning, and it's also her 18th birthday, so thanks. You couldn't miss either one. So
Understandable. Okay, so we're going to move forward to item D2. presentation from the University of Nevada.
Nope. That will, it's not the next, sorry.
Excuse me,
The next presenter is Mr. John Mansour.
I'm sorry. I didn't see there were two and you go then.
Are you sure? Okay. All right,
I
thank
moved
you.
down to the next week after that.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All right, we got it. Again, thank you, Jason. Next, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. John Mansour, who's the Executive Director of the Pacific Association of USA Track and Field. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Mike, and Madam Chair and board members. I appreciate the opportunity to be here today and speak about this. I am in my 41st year as the director of Pacific Association of USA Track and Field. Track and field is my business, obviously, and I've put on over 25 national championships at every level in track and field, in addition to over 40 major marathon championships, including 6 Olympic trials. In the last 23 years, and by the way, since track is all about speed, I'm going to try to say these things as fast as possible. If I can slow down, let me know. I am currently literally in the midst of the NCAA West Region Championship in Sacramento. This is day 3. I have 3 more days to go. So, and I'm noticing your clock on the wall there. That just is, this is too much information for you, but it's very much like a pole vault or a high jump where the high jumpers have 3 minutes to make a jump. One of those things. Anyway, 23 years ago, I was in a room exactly like this in Sacramento with the Visit Sacramento and Sacramento Sports Commission, presenting the same information on outdoor track. The hoteliers there had the same decision to make that you have to make now. They made the decision, and then in 2014, they doubled down on that decision. So for the last 23 years, I've been working with Sacramento Sports Commission, Visit Sacramento, in putting on major national championships. During that time, we have done 5 Junior Olympic National Championships, and that involves 7,000 athletes in addition to 15,000 parents for 7 days in July. We've done 6 NCAA, we're on our 6th NCAA championship right now this week. We have another one planned in 25. We've done 2 USA championships, 1 Masters championship, and that Masters championship is for individuals for 40 years and over. We've done 1 World Masters championship, which involved athletes from all over the world. Again, 8,000 athletes coming in from all over the world, and that is a 2-week competition. And 2 Olympic trials. Olympic trials were 14-day events and televised on NBC Sports. Clearly, they have found this to be a lucrative business for the city of Sacramento. And they are in the outdoor business, not the indoor business. They don't have a building to handle the indoor business. Relative, and I can go back and answer some of those questions that some of you had asked, and I'm happy to do that. But the question relative to the amount of tracks, for instance, west versus east, there are 4 tracks in the western United States. There are no indoor tracks. There are no indoor tracks in the states of California, Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona. There are 4 indoor tracks alone in the city of Boston. California, with its market of track athletes, and track is the #1 sport in high school for girls, and the #2 sport in high school for boys. There are, of course, thousands of athletes that could come and would come if you had that available for them. Now, in addition to having worked with the Sports Commission, Sacramento Sports Commission and Visit Sacramento, in 1994 and 95, I worked with you. I was the meet director of the Reno Indoor Games. That was when we had the track, the wood track that somebody had brought up previously, donated to the university by Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby was a former track athlete himself. He was playing at one of the casinos in town. He just wanted a place to work out. So he donated the track. We did those meets. Those meets were world athletics meets. That meant the Olympic level athlete. They were televised on NBC television. We set 2 American records, one by Jackie Joyner-Kersee. We set 2 world records, one by Michael Johnson, who then went on to win double gold in the Atlanta Olympics in 1996 in 200 and 400. But we also did something that was unique to Reno, unique to the track world, and set the entire country on fire as well as the entire world. El Dorado Casino ran a sports book. And it was the first time anywhere in the world that people could bet on track. And people did. And it caught the attention, of course, of all the networks. And I think we were on every newspaper in the United States. And it showed Reno, and we also did these meets in a different fashion than normal meets. We used the entertainment from the casinos. Dennis Condon was my person I worked at the time, and then Dennis, I think, worked for Dick Clark Productions. Dennis had never seen a track meet in his life. I'm the track expert, and so he asked, "What can I do?" And I said, "Dennis, tell me what you want to do, and then I'll tell you if we can do it." And it was a show. We did entertainment, and that also everybody loved it. The athletes loved it. The fans loved it. We had 4,000 fans in the stands. Unfortunately, the track then was not stored correctly, and that's a very important component of this whole meeting here today, because those tracks, if they're not stored correctly, will warp. And the track did, and it was unusable after 1996. We actually did host the Masters Indoor Championship in 96, but it was unusable. And I've been waiting 6 years, 5 years to do another one. So those are the possible. I also have partnered, by the way, with you on 4 Junior Olympic cross-country championships. So I am in that business. That's what I do. And all the institutions, NCAA, USA, World Athletics, World Masters is very familiar with what we do and likes what we do. We've been doing it, as I said, in Sacramento, but I can bring the show here and then be ready to bring the show here. And so we have an incredibly capable meet director right there, who's 20 years younger than me, who was my meet director for some of those national cross-country championships. And I think he knows how to do it and what to do it, so you have a person in town. So given that the countdown clock, I think, is done or close, I'd be happy to answer questions. But that's what I do. That's what I can bring to the city. And in all the things that I have done, 25 national championships, 40 major marathons in 6 different cities, including Disneyland, shutting down the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco for that marathon. The indoor meets in Reno was by far the most fun, and I considered the top of my list of things I've ever done. And I love the opportunity to do that.
Thank you, John. Love the stories of, I've been here forever and I had no idea. And I have a brother very involved in pole vault, very familiar pole vault summit here. It comes every year. I did have a question on, so USA Track and Field, the events you're doing, are those primarily club events, club athletes?
I do national championships.
Okay, but the association is all.
The association does, and we can easily do club events. So in terms of room nights, let's do this. So in terms of room nights, youth is your best market. So if you're trying to fill the maximum number of rooms, Junior Olympic competition is the best competition to get. The next best thing will be high school, then NCAA, and then USA. So that's the order, because they bring in bigger numbers than, as you go up the ladder. the Olympic level meets are going to bring you the most exposure. So those are the meets that will get broadcast on national television. But we can do meets, we can do national meets, we can do regional meets, we can do local or association level meets. I don't know in this, there's a club, it's, I don't know, Silver State Riders is still active. Yeah. So in this town, I don't think there's a club that's active in track and field anymore, but that wouldn't stop things.
Okay.
Thank you. Other questions?
I have a question.
And there,
First of all, thank you so much. I'm such a massive believer in sports. Now more than ever, you know, with mental health being such a challenge, especially, actually for college age group. It's, there was just a study out, 49% of them have struggled with depression and anxiety. And I just believe that sports, can be such a world of difference. And I'm a horrific runner, by the way, because of my hips from figure skating. I run 5 blocks and I'm like, am I skinny yet? I really have, I have a tough time with it, but I believe in it so much. I guess, one of the things that I would love to know, do you have any comparatives from the tracks on the West Coast, what those numbers look like?
In terms of outdoor tracks, because there's only
Like
4.
numbers of, you know, revenue generating, from the West Coast track? Is that, maybe that's a question for
Is this
Jason,
the indoor track or the
Uh-huh.
outdoor track?
the indoor.
Indoor track. So I don't know the numbers from Spokane or Albuquerque. So I can't tell you that. I do know which events they've hosted and they continue to do them.
Uh-huh.
And Albuquerque just doubled down too. They just went through their first track and now versus their second track. So they're staying in the business. And obviously Spokane Podium is more than just track, it's an event center.
Okay, I don't know if they'd be willing to share it with us, or if they have anything that we could sort of look at, you know, how they're doing and what they're seeing. That also might be helpful if that's something Jason can get a hold of. I don't know, they might see it as being a little too competitive, but actually, I'm a big believer in life brings life, right? And working with everyone so that we can all sort of continue to grow the sport and just the events that you can have, so.
Well, there are more than enough meets to go around, so that's the first thing. Again, with only 4 tracks in the western United States, that's west of the Mississippi, versus there is the border in this town of Boston by itself, but almost every collegiate institution in any cold weather place has an indoor track, because it has to, because that's the only way those athletes are able to train. So there are hundreds of indoor tracks in the Midwest and on the East Coast. And out west, there's just those 4. So with just those 4, and the population of track athletes, there's going to be no shortage. They may feel in competition for the national meets between Spokane and Albuquerque, because they've both been hosting them. And they began to host them the minute they got the track. So, but the other meets that are going to just bring in a lot of room nights and that kind of revenue, those are endless. There's just, yeah, and because they're so close to California, which is the main, the major population area.
And I like the low barrier of entry. You just need running shoes, correct?
Correct.
Right? Okay, thank
In fact-
you.
in
Great
fact,
job.
Yeah, non-spikes are better than, yeah, 'cause those won't tear up the track.
okay, thank you.
I actually do have one question.
Okay,
And this
Mr.
is-
Squire.
and thank you, Mr. Answer. And again, it's kind of an unfair question. It's just back of the napkin, rough guesstimate. When you look at the segment population we're gonna be bringing in for these competitions, could you give your best guesstimate on what percent do you see being juniors? What percent, I almost look at collegiate a little differently, because now you're straddling adult, upper teens, and then the masters category of adult, basically full-on adult competitors.
So, I'll use outdoor figures, but, the Masters, which we are hosting next summer in Sacramento, will bring in, about 1,200 athletes, and then they'll bring with them, that's typically a +1, sometimes +2. It's a week-long competition, so there's 5 to 7 room nights, depending on the individual. Collegiately, so collegiate conference activities, those are limited, of course, to the athletes who can make their collegiate teams. And so if you win a conference championship, whether it's the WAC, and I'm sorry. I knew that was gonna happen. Yeah, beat on, and they're calling me. Don't know how to work the phone, but anyway. So if you have a 10 team conference, and each team will have 30 athletes and 300 athletes that they'll bring in with the coaching staff and parents and others, so maybe 600 to 700 people. It's typically a 3-day competition. Junior Olympics is by far the biggest. That's, like I said, typically when we do a regional Junior Olympic, region meaning just Northern California, 2,000 athletes, and they'll get double that number of parents. And it's a 3-day competition. And then again, the Olympic level is a small number of people, but lots of exposure. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not this sharp. If you were talking like pie chart visual, 50% junior, the rest collegiate masters or not? Or
It just depends on who you want to target.
okay,
We can target anything. You just need to decide who do you want to target, who's your target audience? And then we can go after and create those meets. So we can do all youth meets, or we can do all high school meets, or we can do combination high school, college, or any of the above. Thank you.
One last question.
Okay,
Real quick, Madam Chair. Yes. Does altitude in any way, is it mitigated by an indoor track?
Well, so first of all, Albuquerque's higher than you, and they're hosting the NCAA championships, they're hosting the USA championships and the Masters championships. So altitude is not a barrier whatsoever. Altitude actually helps sprints and jumps. So that the bulk of those people love altitude, they actually get better marks. Altitude does not help distances above 1,500 and up. So there's a couple of events indoor, 1,500, 3,000. So those two events are hurt by altitude, but everything below that is equal or helped by altitude.
thank you. Thank you, John. Appreciate it. Lots of great information. Real quick, Mr. Harrison.
Yeah, John, thanks for being here and peeling away from Sacramento. We know you're busy and appreciate your time. And you referenced that the clock, just so that the rest of our speakers know, that clock's for public comment. So anybody that needs to go beyond that doesn't need to be held to a 3-minute limit. So just want to make sure that we're all clear.
So I didn't get a PR then?
No. We'll have to come back next time.
We'll let you try another time, okay? Okay, let's go ahead. Now we'll move on.
Great.
Mr. Larzato. Sorry.
Next.
So I'm going to move on to D2, the presentation of the University of Nevada and RSCVA partnership. Would like to introduce Ms. Stephanie Rim, Athletic Director at the University of Nevada, Reno, and Mr. Brian Sandoval, President of the University of Nevada, Reno, for their presentation. And really excited to have you here as a former student athlete at UNR, both my husband and I. We are huge Wolfpack athletics supporters. So thank you for taking the time to be here today.
Thank you. Thank you for having us. So I will keep it under the 3 minutes, no question about that. I think everybody can understand how excited we are as an athletics program, just by the number of people are here and hearing directly. I loved, I'm sure like all of you, hearing from our student athletes, knowing the impact it will have on our program. So first and foremost for us, since I arrived, strong initiative from President Sandoval is to make sure that our athletics program is in the community and collaborating with the community. And I was thrilled to hear about this initiative when I got here, of just another way that we can work together with the city of Reno and the community, and really excited about that opportunity. In terms of some nuts and bolts for athletics, our teams have to travel, right? So that is a significant impact for us, for our teams not to be able to travel to have home meets, but our student athletes said it better than I ever could. There is a financial component to that, which obviously is important to me, and that is significant. So we're really appreciative of that. In addition, I have to say, and they didn't mention it, but our staff, some of which are here, in order to try to accommodate our student athletes during the winter, would actually take pieces of equipment, track equipment, and take it to the livestock center. Well, exactly say, but actually put our athletes out there
in the dirt, training in the dirt with some temporary tracks, temporary pits and all of that. Really difficult situation. We were trying to make the best of it, but that is something that I know we will appreciate, our staff will appreciate, and obviously our student athletes. And then the third component for us is we are committed to storing the track. So between the end of March, when the track is done, when the indoor season is over, we as a department there'll be a process for breaking it down that I think we're still trying to figure out exactly how that works. And then storing it offsite and then bringing it back. And we know the temperature control issues that somebody mentioned. And so we're committed to that. We think that's an easy answer for us, just to have the opportunity to work on, to be able to train on the track and have home meets and all of that. So with that, we really appreciate you guys considering this. We're beyond excited about this opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. Mr. President Sandoval. I didn't say governor.
Hey, good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board, and Mr. Harris, Brian Sandoval, President of the University of Nevada, Reno. Really a privilege and honor to be here. And I want to echo what Stephanie talked about, the excitement that we have at the university to be partners with all of you. This is an incredible opportunity. It's an incredible opportunity for the region. It's an incredible opportunity to attract a new market and new visitors. And what I'll go a different direction than what Stephanie talked about. When I hear you talk about the thousands of young athletes that, young men and women that would come and possibly be attracted to the University of Nevada, that would be a wonderful opportunity for us. But we are fully committed to working with all of you. And I just see this as a win-win-win, a great opportunity that we will not see very often. And I think we saw historically the benefits that it could bring to this community and to the university. I think one other item that hasn't been discussed today, and hopefully we don't have this issue this year, is the smoke. And that may be another opportunity that in a tragic circumstance, but to provide opportunities to our student athletes, both at the university and in the community. And I wanted to compliment our two student athletes that are here today. I had the opportunity to watch many of our student athletes compete, and they're just incredible and set a great example. And I think Coach will probably talk about it, but it'll be a great recruiting opportunity for us as well to bring new people into the community, and the ability to host high school meets as well. I think it's really going to have an incredible ripple effect across Washoe County, if not the state. But I'm really competitive like all of you, and I think our destination is the best. And I think it really will be an opportunity to attract people from all over the country, but specifically from the Western United States. So with that, thank you for the opportunity to be here, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Yeah.
Do we have any questions?
So you're willing to put the big N on there? You're willing to go all out and say, this is ours?
Willing, done deal. We would love, as I said, we are your partner, and we would love to see that big blue end.
And the sport wolf.
And the sport wolf, yes. That's the beauty of this area, that we all work together, and we have a university with 150 years of history that we can partner together, which is a national brand. And so I really, like I said, I could keep going and going in terms of the benefit that I see, and the win-win-win opportunity. It's a big investment on your part, and again, we want to make sure that it's beneficial to all.
I do have a question on the so the storage obviously is a huge issue, because we don't want it to wind up like the other track did, not with this kind of investment. But will the university actually be hosting some of the track events that would happen, some of the meets? Is it university hosting, or is it you guys?
I think Coach could talk about that.
Yes, we are already planning.
Can you come up and give us your name for the record? Thank you.
Kurt Elias, I'm the assistant track and field coach and the head track cross country coach. We've already been mapping out the next few years in what competitions we'd like to host. And so we are planning a full collegiate schedule. We actually have some weekends in mind where we could run collegiate meets on Friday, Saturday, and finish with a high school meet on Sunday, or a master's meet. we're trying to spread this through the week. We're also, it's not usual in our sport right now, but we've thought about having meets midweek because that might help the hotels a bit during the winter. And so we're also open to suggestions that might help the folks in this room. So yes, we want to do at least 6 collegiate meets that are hosted by the University of Nevada each winter.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I do have, if you can hang on a minute, Ms. Murdoch, I have Ms. Ferrazza has her hand up with a question.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm sorry, Madam Chair, a little sick today, so sorry I'm not there. Thank you, President Sandoval, for coming in. Just a question, I guess, for you. I'm just looking at the price tag of the track, and I'm super excited about it. Is there an opportunity to partner with the university on the costs of the track? I think we're looking at the agenda item about $5 million plus. Is there an opportunity to, with the cost, to get this thing off the ground?
Thank you, Madam Chair, through Ms. Safraza. Our major contribution is the storage piece. I think that is a significant contribution to making this all pencil out for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Murdoch.
You know, I think it's unbelievably awesome that you've got women and men can use this track. And I don't know if you followed the new way the NCAA set the NIL up, but this is a way for Nevada to have an edge in not only, you said it, President, but in recruiting and national sponsorships. You have to look at this as this is really a big donation in the community and cycle of life. University is coming downtown to Midtown. It's part of our city growth. You know, you bring national events, you bring airlines. So, I mean, this is a bigger investment than just a track and events. It's for the community and you know, it's for men and women. I think it's awesome. It offsets a lot of things because fundraising and supporting and trying to compete at our level, Division I is very hard for any community, especially even Reno. So this is really pretty neat that we get an opportunity to get an edge like this, if it can be, and again, storing it right and using it right, we'll come up with, you know, ways to come up with events, but this is really a good thing for this community.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Murdoch.
Ms. One more, I think, Ms. Commissioner Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I really appreciate you coming down, President Sandoval, and your leadership and making sure that the university is part of our community. And I think that there are a lot of possible ways that we can look to support this project moving forward. And there is the state infrastructure bank, and I'm just wondering if UNR would be willing to do a letter of recommendation if we were to apply for those funds through the state, because I think that that could be a really great fit since it is looking at private money and then also that tie-in with the university and also the community presence of the RSCVA.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Member Hill, we are fully committed to support any type of application for those funds. And we'd be proud to do so. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions, or is he off the hot seat?
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Really quickly. I think now more than ever, it's been really important, and I know because we've worked together on making this a university town and really showing that we have arrived. Because I think our university is just absolutely bar none the best, but I'm very competitive like you. And so one of the things I would love to see, because I think the branding component, you spoke a little bit about this, Mr. Murdoch, that I think is really, really critical. And I know you might not be able to tell us here, but one thing that I would absolutely love to see, and I think it's sort of critical, is putting the brand on the building. Your N, like I said, are we gonna put the N on the building? Because I'd love to be able to continue to show the partnerships throughout town and really send the message that this university has arrived. And, you know, because that was such a big deal for so long. It was like we were so separate from the city, but we really worked hard on bringing the University Avenue and really showing the rest of the community that, you know, we can all participate in its success. So for me, I would love to see that further step in that branding to show the relationship So I would love to see that. And then last but not least, you bring up such a good point. And it's unfortunate, but this is sort of the future that we're living in with climate change and sort of what we're seeing in our weather. I've lived here my whole life. I've never seen the weather like this. I always say you can blame me for it since everything's my fault. But the other aspect that is fantastic about where we live, and I know as runners, you'll understand this, is the altitude. It is such prime for training altitude. So that's another reason why we tend to typically attract great athletes and people who want to train and go to school here. So I think that's another attribute that we have that probably other places don't.
No, Chair Ivy, to the mayor, thank you. And we would be very proud to have Sport Wolf. Home of the wolf pack. It is, you know, we have partnerships now with Renown Health. We're going to break ground on a new business building that's going to be right on the threshold of the freeway in downtown Reno. We're looking at other opportunities on University Way as well. So this is really the beginning of some really great things that 10 years from now, we're going to look back and say, look what we did and look what we accomplished. And you know, I think the mayor and you, I said this before both of you, that a great community needs a great university, and a great university needs a great community. And this is another example of us working together.
Thank you so much.
President, you're contributing to, you're building a hotel.
Yes.
There you have it.
No, and that's another opportunity is as part of that business building will be a hotel conference center.
Right. Ms. Frosta, do you have another question before I let Mr. President Sandoval off the hot seat here?
Yeah, just, I appreciate the storage because I think that was a big thing that came in the bids and the spec proposal as we go further in the agenda. But also, I don't know if it's a question for President Sandoval necessarily, but Mr. Larraguetta. The time, this is off season for us, and I think a goal of the RSCVA as far as the season. Can you just speak to that? When this would be coming in, because that was a priority of ours.
I'll tackle that one, Ms. Faraz, and Mike Larraguetta for the record. So I think the question's correctly. One, seasonality, the indoor track season is November 15th through March 15th, December 1 to March 15th. In terms of timing, if the board approved the track today, we would obviously immediately go to contract. The track takes approximately 9 months to build. It's again, a Mondo track, which would be built in Italy. We would request the timing to be parallel to when we wanted the track to be delivered to the convention center here in Reno. So we would most likely start the build around January, February of 24, with delivery of October, November of 24. And then that time period would allow Ms. Fine and her team approximately 18-month window of selling time to book our first meet starting in December through Q1 of 25.
Yeah, I think my question was more, this is off season for us, correct?
Correct. So one of the things we did was I had Mr. Douglas pull the history of occupancy in Washoe County for the last 10 years. And consistently, November through March, there's always variations, but consistently November through March are the lowest occupied rooms in terms of occupancies for both hotels and motels for Washoe County.
That's traditionally when we use our needs period, when we engage our tourism groups to bring in OTAs, our online tourism folks, which were required through the business plan and through my goals that we put together at least 8 opportunities. We're gonna have about 13 to 15, so that this would complement that.
Yeah, that's, I think, important to the board too, as we move forward with this expenditure, that this is generating room nights on times where we have lower occupancy. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. President Sandoval, thank you so much.
Sure.
Appreciate both of you. Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Grip.
This is a tad bit off subject, but I did want to thank President Sandoval for the investment of the UNR Tahoe campus and look forward to how we not only bring the UNR investment down through the city, but up the Mount Rose Highway and into Incline. So thank you very much for that campus, and your staff that's up there. It's been great to work with them.
Thank you. We won't be just begun. Again, thank you for the opportunity to present today, and we would appreciate your favorable consideration.
Thank you so much. Okay, Mr. Lurkin, I will let you
Before,
take it.
before I introduce our last speaker, just a comment. I'm not sure about the end on the convention center yet, but
I am.
the mayor is. But if the track is approved today, we have committed the track to be in Nevada colors, because what's easier on the eye than blue and gray, right? So, all right, our final speaker today is Mr. Don Page, who is the owner and president of Page Design Group, and he is also our contracted indoor track consultant. Mr. Page.
Mike, appreciate it. We've heard a lot of information today about portable indoor track. So it's really an honor to be here today because I truly love track and field. I've been designing indoor tracks and outdoor tracks for 38 years. I've been involved in the sport almost as long as John. I'm at 48 years. And that's all I do every day, indoor and outdoor running tracks. And so you've heard a lot of people speak before me. And everything they've talked about relates to what is a portable track. The vast majority of the tracks in America are flat. They're flat 200-meter tracks. About 15 years ago, people determined that you can run faster on a bank track. So almost all of our major competitions today, and you've heard John talk about these competitions and everyone else, whether it's the NCAAs or whatever, they are on bank tracks. And the bank tracks are beneficial because of centrifugal force. You can flat out run faster on a banked track than you can on a flat track. And so that's why almost all our track meets today, at every level, high school, college, professional, they want to compete and train on a banked track. It's better for them. Less injuries, faster time, and that's imperative. When we talk about the banked track, what makes this so unique is we set it up in November, you compete on it, you tear it down, and you put it in the storage. Your convention hall is free for the rest of the year. That takes it's a 2-week period to tear it up and tear it down. So this is a very efficient mode that really helps. Those of you that don't know track and field, I'll keep it simple. We run, jump, and throw, men, women, all at the same time. We are a 3-ring circus. Just ask John what he's doing this week over in Sacramento. It's a lot of fun if you consider that fun. If I were to walk into the bank track, and if I'm in the middle of the turn, to give you an idea, that bank track is going to come up to right about here, about 5 feet, 5 inches tall. So it's a good banking. It's one of the highest allowed in the world. That's what we go for. So we get the fast times, which is important. Inside the track oval, we jump, long jump, triple jump, pole vault, and high jump. 4 of us, men and women. We sprint and hurdles on these. And then for safety, outside the track oval, we do our throws. We only do 2 throws in indoor track, shot put and the weight throw. Shot put is a little 16-pound ball that the men throw. And the weight throwers, they throw a 35-pound weight throw. And trust me, you'd be very impressed to see how far they throw 35 pounds. Mike talked a little bit about the construction schedule. We have plenty of time, if this is approved, to notify Mondo to actually manufacture the track. It's going to take him 9 or 10 months. And what they're going to do is Mondo, which is in Italy, they manufacture all the components. They put it all together. And just to make sure it works, they have a warehouse over in Italy. They set the whole track up, make sure it fits, that it's legal, everything is perfect. Then they tear it down and they ship it here and it shows up here at this convention center. And that's quite a process. And it's going to be located in Hall 4. You guys have 5 halls in your convention center. Hall 4 is ideal for this because it has adjacency to Hall 5 if we ever need parts of that. You have outside entrances to get it in. We have all the ancillary rooms that go around it to help support John and a track meet, any type of track meet. But what really makes this facility different than a lot of others, I've heard the word the track down in Albuquerque. Our track is going to be World Athletics certified. World Athletics is the top governing body of track worldwide. Everybody else that you've heard mention these phrases, NCAA, USA Track and Field,
National Federation of High Schools, all these, they all fall under World Athletics. So when they certify a track, it's the highest level in the world. Albuquerque is not WA certified. So we're gonna be better than they are. You've heard about the competition. When a track is World Athletic certified, that means you can host anything you want. I don't care if it's youth, master, amateur, professional, high school, college. It's all legal. And the beauty is, any world record ever set on a World Athletic certified track will be accepted. There's no ifs, ands, or buts. So a youth person sets a world record or an age group record, they're all allowed. And that's important. I want to talk a little bit about the manufacturer because this is very important. Mondo. Mondo is the leader, and I can't state this. They are the most experienced indoor track builder in the world. And I'm going to read you some of the stats on this company because it will impress you. So for the past 12 Olympic Games, consecutive Olympic Games, those games have been held on Mondo. That's outdoors. 291 world records have been set on Mondo tracks. This far exceeds any other vendor or manufacturer in the world, hands down. Let's move to indoors. World Indoor Championships. Of the last 18 World Indoor Championships, 15 of them have been on Mondo tracks. 73% of all indoor world records took place, you got it, on a Mondo track. Let's talk about here locally, American Championships. Of the last 27 American Championships, 26 of them on a Mondo track. NCAA Indoor Championships. 34 of the last 34, all on Mondo tracks. So if you haven't figured it out by now, you're going to get the finest indoor track built in the world by Mondo. So you should be very proud of that. The track is no good if we don't have track equipment, but we're really fortunate. We've got one of the leaders, UCS. It's an American company, but they have a regional office in Carson City. And the #1 sales guy and marketing guy for UCS, Mike Chappell, lives right here in Reno. And he will be our service person. Because whenever you build a portable track or you put together track equipment, you can ask John. Trust me, something is going to break the day of the track. And right. And so you want somebody like Mike Chappell, who I've known for years, and he'll be there. If you're not familiar with what track equipment is, it's a lot of stuff. Pole vault pits, high jump pits, standards, crossbars, hurdles, starting blocks. I could go on and on. It's an enormous list of equipment, and that'll also be stored by the university. Now that we got the track, we got the equipment, where do we put the people? Yeah, put them in some bleachers.
Yeah.
So we got bleachers out here. Again, we went to one of the premier bleacher companies in the country, Hussey. They've been doing this for decades. The beauty of the Hussey is their local dealer is FSI based out of Las Vegas. So they're here in Nevada, but they're also your dealer for the Mondo track. So we've got a company that's involved in your bleachers and in your tracks. So we know we're going to get great customer service, and that is important because as I mentioned earlier, when something breaks, it's always going to break the day of the competition and you're going to need somebody there to fix it. So the portable bleachers are very unique. They're movable, about 176 feet long. They're in 9 sections. You can either put them all in one place, but the beauty of this system by Hussey, you can take 2 or 3 sections. Say you take 3, 2 over there, 1 over there, 7 down the straightaway. All are legal for ADA wheelchair access. That's what makes this system so good. And talking about branding is a big thing at the collegiate level, and it's getting there. Everybody today talks about branding. Look at our tables today. We have all kinds of branding. So the bleachers are going to be wrapped with a vinyl fabric for 2 reasons. 1, aesthetics. 2, you can add custom branding. But 3, it's safety. Everything we do in track and field revolves around safety. We have to make it safe first. That vinyl skirting that goes around the bleachers will keep, whether they're youth, professional athletes or whatever, we don't want them going underneath our bleachers and getting hurt. So basically, in conclusion, we got one of the best tracks, if not the best track in the world. Phenomenal track and field equipment, great bleachers. You guys are ready to go. I hope you enjoy it. I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you, Don. Appreciate it. Do I have questions?
Yeah, I have one.
One
One of the things that's really important to me too is the accessibility piece, and you touched on it a little bit with the ADA. Talk about, because we have a really amazing program at the city of Reno for our veterans and disabled veterans, and also like hosting with the Special Olympics and things like that. Can you talk about, is this track conducive to wheelchairs? What does that look like? What can,
So
are there other?
we don't do a lot of wheelchair races, and I may be wrong, so if I might need some help here from my colleagues. Indoor doesn't run a lot of wheelchair races. Outdoors we do. Special Olympics. I mean, every 4 years you have the Olympic Games, and right after that you have the Paralympic Games in the same host city. So indoors, it would be a little more problematic to have wheelchairs on a banked track. And so you don't see a lot of wheelchairs participating in indoor track or winter track.
But is that something that, what do we call it, material or can withstand?
Oh, sure.
Okay. And then the other thing is like in skating, we have different size rinks, right? And some can hold others, events based on their size or requirements. So would this size of track be able to hold like the biggest events that are in track and field?
Yes, so almost all tracks today are 200 meters in length, and that is a limit established by World Athletics. And almost all the details of the track follow the rules of World Athletics. That's how we get our World Athletics certification. So today you could not have a 300 meter banked track. Just to put it in perspective, outdoors, the tracks are 400 meters. So all these new indoor tracks that are being built in the United States today are 200 meters and they're banked.
Okay, great. Thanks. Great job.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. Appreciate your presentation.
Thank you.
Okay, we will close item D3. And we will move on to E1. Review discussion on possible action regarding the acquisition of the portable indoor track equipment and portable bleachers. We are asked for acquisition, I think for an RFP 2023 for the acquisition of a portable indoor track from Truckee Meadows Construction in an amount not to exceed $3,462,390. B, portable bleachers from FSI Flooring Solutions in an amount not to exceed $1,208,630.42. And C, track equipment from USC in an amount not to exceed $365,399.81. Mr. Larragetta, do you have anything you want to close or present on this item before board discussion?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mike Larragetta for the record, I want to thank our presenters for today. I think they provided some in-depth information and knowledge about the potential of what this indoor track represents. And I said thank you to all of you. We really appreciate it, especially the university for this partnership that we're hopefully engaging in and bringing the university further to the south part of town. And with that, we appreciate your support moving forward.
Okay, so I will. Discussion on this.
So you probably need to make a motion and then discussion.
Do you?
No, I'm gonna call.
Yeah, open discussion, right?
Oh, I need, do you want to?
No, I'm just asking Dan. I don't think we need a motion to have discussion.
No, that's what I'm moving. I was just double checking if we were going to go to finance first. And if finance was gonna give us any information, but I wanna, that'll be coming later. So let me open it to general discussion and questions from the board. Mr. Murdock.
No, mine's gonna be financial. So do you want me to wait for the financial portion, or do you want me to ask questions?
No, go ahead and ask it now, and our attorney will tell us if you're good to go.
As we look at the price tag, about $5 million, is there any way we can get creative to finance this through grants, through RSCVA, through a bank loan paid off in 5 years? Is there, so we don't drain everything here, is there a way to be creative with financing this?
Absolutely. So if this receives board approval today, we will look into any kind of grant funding through the state or otherwise. But we don't think financing is needed at this time. About $1.8 million of this track payment would be due in July if this was approved today. So that's coming up really quick. That really wouldn't leave us time to seek financing for that portion of the payment. For the remaining $3 million, our plan, we have a tiered approach. So you'll remember that this year when room tax revenues came in excess of budget, we went to the board with augmentations to include that as part of our operating expense budget. We will monitor room tax revenues for the first 6 months of fiscal year 24 to see if room tax revenues do come in over budget. We would save those essentially for the payment. We wouldn't come to the board and say we want to use these on advertising or other initiatives. After that, we would look towards funding that might not be used in the fiscal 24 budget, like the $500,000 of special opportunity funding. If we've reached January of next year and we haven't used that yet, that's probably something we redirect towards the track payment. And when all said and done, if there's still additional dollars needed, we've allocated up to $2 million of the fiscal year 25 capital budget towards this payment. So we feel really confident in our funding model that we wouldn't need to seek outside financing, but that is an option.
And when you put the financial package together and you've got sponsorship opportunity, which lowers some of the risk on us coming up with money, it makes sense.
Absolutely.
But you're gonna get creative on who'll be able to keep.
Absolutely, yeah. We feel confident with how we've structured the payment plan. And obviously financing is always an option to us, but we don't recommend that at this time due to how quickly the first payment is due and what is left for the second payment.
Mr. Squaga?
No, and thanks for, I do think, and I'm speaking, kind of preaching to the choir here, I think, this is a great project where there's a community piece to this. I think, I mean, one of my top positives of this is obviously the shoulder season that we're addressing. There's a destination branding, there's a community outreach, but also the partnership with the university. This has been through the years, and I think I really, I know President Sandoval had to leave, but from the years of leadership from him as governor to stepping in this role, I think there's so much positive momentum. I'm glad Rick brought it up because there's the reality though too, right? There's a $5 million ticket that is without blowing a hole in this organization's budget, I think we've got to get really creative and very candid and sit down and figure out how would we move forward on this. You know, I appreciate the work Ms. Larragetta and Ms. Fine of all, 21 months working on this. And yet I have to be honest, as a board member, I've had it for about 21 days of, wanting a quick cup of coffee, sit through the packet that I'm still trying to absorb. I think in those numbers, it was estimated 2.1 to 4.4 were the numbers that we were penciling. I was looking at about 3 million. We're at 5.1. These are realities, right? Because it's our organization that's ultimately going to have to pay for this. I do think I'm very comfortable, and I think I definitely see the value. We can argue about different age groups. Do we want more youth sports? And that's a whole other discussion. But I think net, it's a worthwhile proposal to go after. I will say that as chair of the finance committee, and having met about 2 weeks ago to basically finalize the budget for 23-24, we did bring up where is the track discussion, and at that point we didn't have firm numbers. We didn't think it was going to fall in this fiscal year, but it would be future. I'm hesitant in the sense of not hesitant in supporting it, but I'm hesitant for the next agenda item beyond that we're going to reopen the budget. We're gonna start the whole, that was a 2 to 3 hour meeting in itself in trying to prioritize CapEx and marketing dollars and COLA increases and air service funds. I'm really worried that we just start unraveling that discussion. So I want to be kind of thoughtful and hear from the rest of the board on best next steps. The other thing I just want to be mindful of is in committing to a $5 million purchase investment. You know, in a month, we're not going to have a CEO. We'll be searching for a new CEO. We're going to have 3 new board members roll off, or 3 existing roll off, 3 new come on. Ms. Hill, I know you're fairly new to the group of about 1 hour in. My point being is I don't want to handcuff any discussions for the next 2 years that board and that new CEO is going to be saying, what were you guys thinking, right? So again, is one vote on the board. I'm fully in support for all the reasons that we all discussed of moving forward on this. I really think, and I don't know, Mike, you might be able to speak to this, how firm it is that we have to know today how we're gonna, you know, we don't really know how we're gonna pay for it, I guess is my bigger point. And I think if we could, whether it's, and I'm not saying we have to do it in the finance committee, but either kick it to a finance committee, kick it to a special opportunity committee. Let's really sit down. Ms. Hill brought up, and this is where I'm not in the government sector. I don't understand how this works. I know there's been a lot of money really thrown out since COVID to the point where now you're hearing the term clawback. Before anything gets clawed back from either our community or the state or on a federal level, this isn't that big a number when you're talking about those streams. And I'm not even asking to get anything free for our organization. I'm just saying, could we do a 3-year bridge loan where we pay this in 3? So again, getting creative and trying to figure out how we make this. You don't have to sell me on the track. I think we're all there, but anyway, I'd love to hear the rest of the board and kind of where they're at.
Ms. Silver?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I agree with Mr. Esquaga. I think there's incredible enthusiasm in this room for the track, myself included, and I don't think anyone can poke a hole in what this would do for the community, the city, tourism, etc. But I am interested in a more deep dive into the budget, and I guess Ms. Yeager is suggesting the money is there. From what I'm looking at, we would have to take it from somewhere else. And I think that's what we need to better understand. I don't doubt that this would prove a successful venture, but I just want to understand what we're giving up in the budget to finance this. And will some new board members say, what happened to the marketing budget, or what happened to the operational budget, or building maintenance budget? I just think we have to do our due diligence financially to support the enthusiasm that we've heard today and all feel about the track option.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
If I can just add into that, and not even to go down, great presentation, great information. The 1.8, I think, is what we're looking at around for that deposit. That looks like it's can be very doable based upon monies that were either allocated for CapEx or monies that were not used in there. It's the 3.3. The only thing I want to caution the board is we've had a lot of augmentations over the last 2.5 years, which has been phenomenal. The trends in terms of where those will be going to in the future, we're talking about a rocky travel and tourism year moving forward, inflation, layoffs, all those types of things. So the only thing I would caution in the discussion is that we don't rely on an augmentation to be able to help pay for this. And I know that Mike and Courtney and Shelley and team have done a ton of work on this, but there needs to be some choices that are made when it comes to the budget if we're going to make this happen.
Okay. Ms. Ferosa?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I totally agree with the other members of the group. If we could send this back to Finance Committee just to vet the financing, and I actually had several questions on the bids as well. Like we had one that was, I guess, non-responsive. I didn't see that in the staff report. What made them non-responsive? And also, we had two. I didn't know if they were single source or we went out to bid on the others. So if you really deep dive into the bid documents, which I did, I had several questions on those. And I do think I'm totally supportive of this, but I would like to see the finance committee just zero in on the actual numbers, and I would like to know, what's going to be deferred. Just going through the CapEx in our next agenda item for the budget, we still have deferred maintenance on the some of our facilities. So I just think we may have to go out and I think Mr. Esquaga or Mr. Silver said it on a bridge loan, but I am supportive of it. I just would like to see the finance committee vet it and see the different options for making it happen. Thank you.
Ms. Fraza, and then just to follow up on that, I know Courtney and Trent both worked on prioritizing. We got $4.2 million in the CapEx, which will come up next in terms of the funding in that. And there was a priority list put together that if we decide to move ahead with the down payment, that we do, and we will find those dollars to be able to get to the down payment. So that's for further discussion when we get there.
Did you want to, Ms. Frost, did you want Mr. Larragetta to answer your question on the bid? The
I
non-responsive
could go
bid?
through it. I have honestly 10 questions on the bid. I even saw in the bid documents, I didn't see they exclusively prohibit union wages. I don't know what they mean by that in the bid documents, but I believe this project has to be prevailing because it's public funding. So I don't know. I just saw several questions. Why was CG and B non-responsive? That's a question I would have. It said they were non-responsive. Why were they non-responsive, for example? Wasn't in the staff report.
Sure. So thank you, Madam Chair. Everyone, as far as I can answer a couple of those questions. We contacted the Labor Commissioner's office regarding whether they consider this a public work because of the portable nature and the fact that it is constructed initially off-site. They said it wasn't. So we didn't need a public works number. As far as the bid being non-responsive, it was a failure to complete the bid form and provide all of the information required by the competitive bidding statutes.
Other comments? Questions?
Did we go out to bid on the other two?
So the other
The
two-
equipment?
So the equipment in the bleachers, so we can piggyback on other governmental agency bid awards. So I believe, and maybe Mike or Shelley or even Jose may know better. I believe one was through Sourcewell and the other was through a GSA bid.
That's correct, but sorry, Mike, let me get it for the record. Jose or Amy, would either of you be comfortable coming up and addressing that? Yeah, thank you.
Jose Martinez, Director of Facilities Operations, for the record. Ben, you are correct. One of the contracts was under a Sourcewell contract and the other was under GSA, so government contract.
So that basically means another government entity or agency has bid this out, and these were the lowest responsible bidders. And so we're allowed to work off of that rather than reinventing the wheel and doing it again.
Correct.
Okay, so we are getting the lowest bid on those.
Yes.
And then under the flooring FSI in the documents, they specifically state that they don't cover if there's, construction needed. I think exclusions, there's several exclusions, major floor prep. Do we have any money in this budget for major floor prep for the track? Is that included in the $5 million?
Hang on just a second,
This is Don Page speaking. So the FSI contract that you're referring to, that was for new construction for a new building. This is an existing concrete floor, so that was excluded from that contract for an existing concrete floor.
Okay, so there's no prep whatsoever, even on an existing concrete floor for this track.
That is correct, because the track itself will have leveling feet on the bottom
Right.
of all the structures. So yeah, the concrete floor will remain as is, as it currently sits today.
Okay, and then just last question for Ben. So is this prevailing or not?
No, I don't believe it is. So the track is being constructed overseas, put together overseas, it's shipped here and it's assembled. And the Labor Commissioner's Office has taken the position that it doesn't qualify as a public work and it's not required.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Silver.
Just a quick question, based on what Ben said. I understand prevailing wage wouldn't apply, but who would be doing would it be RSCVA staff, or we would hire new staff to construct, to put the shipped product together?
So this may be a Don Page question. I think initially it's.
I mean, is that included in this budget?
Yeah, so the original track will be built in Italy, gets shipped here. They will send with it a supervisor that will work with local laborers and will help train employees of the convention center to teach them how to assemble and how to tear down. In the contract, we have that Mondo representative who's been doing this for a long time. His name is Luca, and he's a very talented individual. He goes all over the world building indoor tracks. And so Luca will be here for 4 times to help train the staff here as to what to do and what not to do, and how to tear it apart and set it up. So that is included in the contract. So your staff here, Jose's staff, will be fully trained as to how to tear it up and set it up. So,
Can I ask one question? And we see this a lot, and I think we're all super, super excited, right? And we're all talking about the benefits and how wonderful it is. Can you tell me though, maybe what are some of the downsides you think that we should be aware of? And for everything that you do, there's always something that you know, just things that might be a little bit more challenging that we haven't thought of. Some of the things that maybe we could address before going down a road, so we can think how to avoid some of that. Is there
definitely,
insight you can give us?
there's one big thing. Anybody that's ever been around a convention center or any professional team sport in the world, whether it's an NBA basketball court, a hockey arena, volleyball courts, tennis indoors, anything that is portable. Anytime you touch it, you have the chance to degrade it, to damage it. So by having the Mondo representative here to help train Jose and all the workers that will be handling the track, that was very critical to this whole process. Because as you set it up and tear it down, there's a list of do's and don'ts. For instance, you never hit it with a hammer.
I should hope not, right?
No, well,
But I think you bring up some good points. I mean, these are things that you really have to.
and that's why in the contract, we had Mondo representative here for the next 2 years, teaching us and showing us how to gently take care of this. And the Mondo has been doing this for almost 30 years. To give you an idea how advanced they've gotten, when this track shows up in the trailers at your convention center and they put it together, you will not see a single hammer, drill, or wrench. It's all by special mechanisms that interlock to each other. It's called their clamshell. It's very proprietary. They've been working on it for years, and it gets better and better. And so when they're out there putting their track together, it is seamless. That's why they build it first over in Italy and ship it here. They know it works. And they've been doing this for a long time, and that's why they are the best in the world.
Thank you. I appreciate everyone who's here today. Obviously, I feel the same as far as not only the opportunity. We talk a lot about sports, you know, and about really trying to expand all of the things, the tourism, the room nights, the activities in our community, and sports has been on our mind a lot and on conversation of this board since I got here. And it just, and we talked about our opportunity fund. We talked about opportunities to bring new things here that are not here and new audiences here. I think this absolutely fits the bill on all those things. I also like the fact that you're looking at room nights, so we're getting, heads and beds for Mr. Murdoch. We're getting airline, people, some driving in, some flying in. The economic impact of every track meet that comes in is above. I mean, the room night's important and the gambling is important, but that full economic impact of everything they do when they're here, when they're shopping, when they're eating out at restaurants, every single event that comes in helps this community and all the businesses here. And so I appreciate, Mike, the feasibility study. For me, that was really important to see all those numbers. I like facts and info to kind of back up a decision before we make, and this is a big one, huge decision, but ROI and looking at, what, 4.5 years we're anticipating an ROI on this and the potential moving forward for the fiscal side of it, but then the exposure, for marketing and Christina and the exposure and the big needs that can bring even larger exposure to our community and people who come here that come back then. Yeah, they come for a track meet and then maybe they come visit again because they enjoyed it. So all of the positives of and the fiscal potential for the whole community, I think that 5 million, even though it's big, I feel confident in what we can recoup and moving forward, what that can do for, I'm not as concerned. I'm a fiscal conservative. You guys know that. So for me to, when I need to look at a large money to spend, I want to make sure I'm confident in booking meets, you gentlemen, and talking about the types of events we can bring Shelley and her team. I mean, the market is there, obviously, with so few indoor tracks in the Western United States. On the fiscal side, Courtney, briefly again, because I know you mentioned it, but we're kind of, it is, with the 1.8 on the budget, and I know budget is actually next, but this is pertinent to our decision right now. On the money that we're the 1.8, where are we finding that money? And then, of course, it's a secondary conversation, the other 3 million, which I think, but on the 1.8 for right now, what we only have, there are a couple of things that you're looking at, adjustments to the budget that came to the finance committee, minor adjustments. Can you repeat those again for me?
Absolutely. So for the $1.8 million, the CEO worked with our vice president of facilities to reprioritize certain projects. So from the projects list that we presented to the finance committee, certain projects were reduced or delayed to future years to make room for the $1.8 million payment if the board were to approve the track today. Because per the payment schedule that was provided to us, that payment would be due in July. So we had to move quickly to reallocate capital funds in fiscal year 24 to accommodate that payment. Okay, and that list, we did include a before and after list in our capital presentation too, just to know where the reductions were made.
Right, and there was a really good chart on that. Trent, can you remind us where we're doing the delays on what capital projects?
We'd be looking predominantly at paving projects, and we could delay the paving and just do a fill on certain cracks to kind of extend that pavement that's there out. Not gonna be a big deal. It'd be nice to pave, but we can do that fine and then put that money into the track.
I was gonna say, we found alternative solutions on
How
a
much
short
is
term.
that money? If I may ask.
It's $1 million for one of the projects.
Yeah, we had $1 million over at the convention center and another $500,000 over at livestock.
So we were just looking at an alternative instead of redoing the whole lot. Trent and team has come up with a different solution. Save money, it's a short-term solution, but allows us to get to that down payment within a timely manner.
Chair.
Okay, thank you.
And-
Mr. Chapman.
Question for Trent, the other one looks like the AMR restroom remodel. They're comfortable that remodel could be postponed as well?
Yes, yeah, they're likely used restrooms at this time, kind of in a back area. So that wouldn't be a problem to delay that a year or two and we'd be fine.
And just for the record, we're putting $9 million into the CapEx in the current fiscal year, which is the largest we've done in 20 years. This was $4 million, so we just be delaying some of that stuff, but there's been a big lift in this current fiscal year to improve product at all 4 of those institutions.
Madam Chair, just a comment.
Yes.
And this is really a question for Jose, just for clarity for the board. It's my understanding that if we were to not vote for approval today, that the bid would no longer be valid. Is that correct? They would expire? I believe they're valid for 30 days.
So,
I'm sorry.
thanks a lot. Once again, Jose Martinez. So yes, that is correct. We'd have to go back out and acquire the bids just because of the nature of the supply chain issues that we're having, getting steel for the bleachers, the equipment for the track also could potentially.
And Jose, with that, potential for the price to go up as well.
Excuse me?
Potential that the price could go up as well.
Absolutely. That's.
We're locked in with the current bid, but if we had to wait and we rebid, we look at not only supply chain, but potential higher cost for what we're.
Potentially a higher cost, especially for the bleachers. The bleachers are the main concern. The track itself, I believe we have well into July to that the bid is good. The bleachers themselves are early July, and then we would have to acquire another bid.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and actually, I have heartburn over that, quite personally, as a board member. I think being put in this position where you either vote on it or it's no longer good. I think it's very poor. I think it's a great project. But that bothers me. I just, there's a lump number, 3.4 construction, and I actually thought we'd see a line item, Mondo track, X amount.
Yeah.
How much is the track? Not 3.4 as into the construction company. How much are we paying Mondo?
Courtney, do you want me to?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a breakdown, I believe, that Ms. Jaeger is presenting in the budget itself. The entire cost of the track is 3.46 million. The entire cost of the bleachers is 1.208. And the entire cost of all the equipment is 376,889. For a
I
total.
saw 3.4 to the construction company.
It says Trucking Mills Construction Portable Track.
Are they the ones building the track?
That's for the track. So they're the general contractor.
What's the cost of, when we got a bid from Mondo, is it 3.4? So the construction company's building it for free?
So it's built into the three.
It's built in. Their costs are built in. That's correct.
The other thing, can I just say, to your point, Stephen, I would agree with you. It's always hard to swallow whenever you're saying you got to do this or this happens. One of the things I think would be helpful, and I don't know where the board is at on this, but I think to your point, that it should go to the Finance and Audit Committee probably to hash out a lot of these things. You guys sort of do a really good job of looking at those before. Obviously, maybe you'd have to call a special meeting, but I also don't like that. But I think there is something to be said about having the Finance and Audit Committee really run through the numbers. And I'd also ask, what about those bleachers? Are those bleachers just going to be used strictly for that, or can they be used for other things?
They can. So the bleachers, the 1,200 seats, portable bleachers would reside in the convention center. When they're retracted, they only go 6 feet from the wall, and they also have tarps that cover them. So they could absolutely use it for other sporting events that the sports team books. If the Atlantis chooses to do boxing events within the convention center, any events that we would.
So these are all purpose.
We would,
So-
correct, we would
So
rent
it's not
them.
just like, this is just for.
That is correct.
Okay, okay.
That's correct.
Well, that's good to know, because then we know that we're going to get other life out of them.
That's correct.
Okay.
Chairwoman,
No, oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jessica.
Chairwoman Bybee, trustee, or, I'm sorry, board member Esquaga, are you on the finance committee? I'm sorry.
Yes,
Can you guys, is there a way, because I do have a lot of questions on this. Is there a way we could do both? That you guys can convene a special meeting of the finance committee just to vet this and then still come back and, if we had to have a special meeting, so the bids are still good, because I just think there's several questions on this.
well, can I just add if I'm remembering, again, the packet was about yay thick. The bids were open like April 26th. They were closed and awarded May 7th or 9th, somewhere there. I mean, that was a very quick turnaround. The bid is fresh, right? I mean, I don't know if we can reach out to the vendor and say, look, we're a public agency. Can you give us another 30 days? I don't think that it isn't like we're letting that lapse. But I think to say, hey, if you don't, bid's gonna go bad, we have to start all over, that puts a lot of pressure on the board. But I think there are some questions. I think we still don't really have that. What are we budgeting for if we're looking at 5 years of this, we still don't have a number. What is it gonna take to reset it back up? Because those are numbers that it's gonna be substantial. I mean, and again, I'm fine, but I think we had to know going in that it's gonna be $250,000. There's gonna be, the other thing I think that was brought up, and I might have missed it stepping out. What is the life again of a track?
10 years.
10 years? Okay, great.
Now, that being said, just to comment on that, is that I asked Mr. Page this question yesterday about Albuquerque's track, because they just purchased their second track. And correct me if I'm wrong, Don, but the first track lasted 20 years?
It did.
Oh, so it just depends on.
Activity.
Okay.
If I may, Ben, I have a question.
You have a comment? Okay, go Mr. Murdock and then I'll let Mr. Kennedy.
Could you approve this in, subject to the finance committee and working out and answering the questions in a financial package so that we don't screw up the deadlines? Or is there a way, and the finance committee has to come back to and make everybody comfortable? Yeah, a recommendation, or is there a way to do that?
So, and so you're, correct me if you feel otherwise. So I think you've got a couple options. One, you can approve this today. If you approve it today, then we're gonna need to revise the approved budget to provide for the payment. If you don't approve it today, you could approve the budget as was presented to the finance committee. The finance committee could meet. We could look at ways to shift funds to whatever we need to do to provide for the track payment and come back and approve the RFPs and the revised budget. But we've got to do a budget this month, so we've got to approve a budget today. So it's either going to include the track or it doesn't. If it doesn't, we can do what needs to be done within the next few weeks to get finance together, figure out how to make the payments if they're comfortable, and then we bring a revised budget back in June.
First off, what's the deadline of the bid going bad? And then also, how quick, if we were to decide we're gonna get a finance committee meeting next week, how much posting is what's the earliest we can do?
3 business days.
Okay. And I'm
Can
totally
you
open.
answer the question on the bid timing?
I think I'd defer to Jose just to be sure. Yeah, and I just brought that up, Mr. Squaggin, just for information, so the board knew what the bid said, we're trying to.
Well, no, it's good to know because I hate to not move on it and then find out that, oh, guys, by the way, it went bad. So,
Right.
So I don't have an exact date with me right now, but I can definitely find that. I have that information. It mainly for the bleachers. It was mentioned to myself that it would be minimal if the price of steel went up. But for the track, it's very typical and common for RFPs to put a 30-day guarantee on their bid. So it's very common.
is it common to ask for a moderate extension?
It is, and we could potentially do that.
And when is our 30 days? When does the 30 days start?
I don't have that information with me right now,
Okay.
but I can definitely get that to you.
Wait a minute, can we get that information before we make this decision? I mean, we can move on to another agenda item. I think that's important.
Yes, I could go and get that information within the next.
Okay. A moment, something to consider too, and actually, I think Courtney and Trent have kind of given us where that 1.8 will come from, even though, and I'm on finance too. So we didn't have that information when we sat at finance, but then staff went to work to provide that. And I'm confident in the work that they've done for the 1.8 I know what you're saying, because then we're looking at the whole other $3 million is out of next fiscal year. And is a different issue aside from that. But if this group decided that they weren't comfortable without finance seeing it again, to provide additional details and information, our next meeting, our June meeting, is a week earlier. It's June 15th. So that would be our next board meeting for June, is a special meeting, not the 22nd, our normal date. So we're meeting a little earlier for the actual board meeting if finance, if that's the route you all decide to go in. But I think what we do need from Jose is to look at if it would be June 15th, is that, if that's the direction that you want to go. I'm comfortable today, but it's up to the rest of the
Basically,
board.
we would kick it down to June 15th, as long as it doesn't screw up any of the
We could,
the shot clocks that we've got on this thing.
Yeah.
If it did screw it up, would it be possible to move the special meeting even earlier, the 15th meeting even earlier? To accommodate that?
Based on board schedule.
We'll get a finance committee done in between. The one thing, and I'm open to Ms. Yeager's recommendations. However, I do think we haven't vetted other options. I mean, if there was a possibility of, you know, I'm gonna say ARPA, I don't even know if that's it, but if there's some
infrastructure bank.
some infrastructure bank that we can access to say, hey, actually, we'll do this in 2 bites. And we don't have to mess with because, and I appreciate your willingness, Trent, on moving our CapEx plan, but that just means it gets kicked down that much more and something else is deferred and we have a cooler that goes out, or there's a special request for an event or transportation funding, Andy, or lake issues, right? That we all have to go cobble the money together, so.
Well, and we've got, for me, the 3 million is obviously the bigger bite of the apple. And I feel comfortable with the 1.8 for right now. But if we look at the state infrastructure bank, if that's a possibility, if we look at grants or other creative financing, because that's for next year's fiscal budget, it gives us time, but we can't do state infrastructure grants or anything for July. That's not happening. I think you mentioned that. So really the bigger, those opportunities, I think we absolutely need to look.
Well,
at.
and to the opportunity fund, to me, I don't know what everybody's idea was when we set that aside, but this is exactly what,
Right.
I don't know what more
Yeah.
falls into that definition is, this is something that came forward. Let's
With a
get a
half
jump
million
start.
dollars.
Right. So you're
Yeah,
down to 1.3.
Turns into $1 million next year,
Turns into $1 million next year.
right? I mean,
Or no, we're
We
doing-
500,000 each year. 500,000 is what marketing awards through the application process. Then there's a remaining 500,000 that, as you mentioned, Stephen, you could allocate.
Right. Which again, and I know we could say, well, something else might come, but to me, we don't have a whole lot of opportunities coming forward to drive 20,000 room nights in the first year.
Madam Chair.
So do we?
So
Okay.
I'm seeing something on page 131 of the packet. Item number 14 says this budget proposal expires after 30 days from issued date. But I can't find the issued date on that actual proposal.
including when I'm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so do you want to, we need to take a quick break or we need to move on and hold this for right now? Because I think what I'm hearing is that you guys want to get that date because that'll determine
Madam Chair.
what our vote is right
And
now.
Jose, Mr. Martinez actually has a copy of the bid we provided him, so he's reviewing it right now. He
Okay,
can bring that date back to us if we wanted to take it.
okay. Or we can move on to the next item.
Well, actually, be probably the next item, right? Isn't it?
Well, but we can do the budget, we can start the budget presentation. And then, so we will. Are we just tabling this for now? Okay, I'm gonna table that, table item E1 temporarily while we wait for that information. And let me go ahead and let, Ms. Baker go ahead with our, fiscal year budget resolution, and that might help. Provide some more finance information for us.
allowed to make a comment at this point?
Yes, well, yeah, because you have it.
Where, you need to comment on the fact, I think this is why we have a finance term, to do a deep dive into this sort of monumental money. No one here doubts or has a doubt about the future of a track or arena. But I think our future responsibility is to not have gun to our head about a bleacher contract, but to say, where is the other money coming from? And while I appreciate Trent's willingness to postpone the paving such, there are other ramifications of coming up with the remainder of the money, and future boards will be held to a standard of size. So I think we need a special meeting, more due diligence on that budget.
Well, and
highly recommend that.
if we had had the bids, all of this would have come before our finance committee.
Right.
When we did the budget,
Exactly.
we
But
would have had been able to consider that, and we didn't.
that's one of the reasons, I think, then, to have a special meeting of the finance committee. To say, look, we're all very enthusiastic about this. We want to see it happen. Where's the money coming from? What does it mean cobbling together? What are we pulling from one area? So there are no surprises later on. If it's bathrooms and paving, okay, but what if it's 5 other things? I just don't have that information in front of me. There was no detail on what we cobbled together and from where. So I think that's the responsibility of finance.
Okay, do I have a quorum still? Because
We need to call a recess.
Madam Chair,
I'm gonna call a 5-minute recess. I don't have my quorum.
oh,
Well,
Do we need a, do we need it?
Well, we do it.
No, well, let me see. Wait a minute. That's 1, 2, 3. I've got 5 now, and I've got a couple on board on online. Let me go ahead because.
Madam Chair. Can I
Yes,
just ask one question? Do we have the agreement with the university for the storage? If we move forward with this, do we have something? I know they said, do we have that materialized or formalized?
and
Ben Kennedy for the record. I don't believe so. I have not seen an MOU or other document with the university. I think it's a verbal commitment at this point.
Okay, well, we probably need to get that too, if we're gonna move forward, just something, formalized before we do the expenditure.
yeah, and unfortunately, Mr. Larragetta stepped out, so we can ask him that question. Ms. Braza. So let's go ahead and, for the moment, because we've moved to budget, let Ms. Yeager go ahead and move forward on our budget.
Okay, we'll go ahead and kick this off. So good morning, Courtney Jager, Vice President of Finance. Today, I'm presenting to you the President and CEO's proposed budget, including the capital plan for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2024. So first is our agenda for this presentation. We'll review the capital improvement plan for the fiscal year, and then we'll move on to the budget. So we'll start off with an overview of what the capital plan is, review the fiscal year 24 proposed capital projects, give some more detail on how financing the indoor track project could work preliminarily. For our previous discussion, we'll likely meet with the finance committee to discuss that in more detail, but we can just talk high level about what our plan was for that if the board had approved the track today. And we'll give a status update on the projects that were budgeted during fiscal year 23. So if you go ahead and turn to page 1 of the capital plan in your binders, there is a lot of information regarding the capital plan on that page. But to sum it up, the capital plan identifies capital improvement projects for the upcoming year. So the RSCVA funds capital improvements for the Reno Park Convention Center, and the Reno Park Livestock Event Center. Contractually, improvements for the Reno Event Center and the National Bowling Stadium are funded by the city of Reno. We will occasionally fund projects at those facilities based on need or available funding, which we did in fiscal year 23, and we plan to do again for fiscal year 24. And when building the capital plan, we assess the needs of the facilities, considering different priorities like safety and functionality to determine the projects to address within the next year. This year, capital expenditures are budgeted at $4.2 million, which you'll also see on page 2 of the capital plan. This lines up with our strategic funding policies, which allocate up to 10% of total room tax collections to capital. So if you turn to page 3 of the capital plan, you'll see the proposed capital projects for fiscal year 24. That same list is here on the screen. So on the right are the CEO's capital projects that were presented to the Finance Committee on May 9th. After that presentation, bids were received for the indoor track project, and on May 12th, the payment schedule was received. Based upon the CEO's review and consideration of those items, the capital projects list was revised. So the list in bold shows what capital projects would look like for the year if the indoor track down payment was included. The list on the right was our list before considering the track.
So just to clarify, Courtney, what we viewed as the finance committee was this list without portable track, right?
Correct. The list all the way on the right, that's everything that was vetted by the finance committee.
Conform rate and.
Yes, I'm sorry. Perfect. Okay.
So Trent, our vice president of facilities, can go into more detail on some of the larger projects. We can talk about the projects that we reviewed with the finance committee too, just so the board has an overview of those. Just talk about some of the larger items. You're good to go, Trent.
You ready? Trent LaFerrier, Vice President of Facilities for the record. So for the 23-24 capital projects that we're discussing right now, along with the track, there's a number of items in here. I can go over them briefly, or if you have any questions, we did this in the Finance Committee. I don't know if we want to go into detail on them again. Totally up to you.
If you've got any of the high level ones that, the bigger ones that might, if anyone has questions.
Well, like,
And anyone, go ahead and ask.
we've got $300,000 for the cooling tower repairs, if they can't see it. Oh, sorry, for the cooling tower repairs at the convention center, that's a must. They're aged, they're worn out, the materials are worn out, so that was something we definitely want to attack. The runway windows, we discussed that, those are the windows along the west face of the convention center on the Virginia Street side, they're deteriorating, the weather stripping is gone. When we get rains like we had this season, we have a lot of leaks, so we want to attack that. That's something that we just can't put off anymore. We've got skylights, similar item. They're just worn out, the weather stripping is worn out, so we want to attack that. Down at I don't know, the mags, which are your metal detectors for events that we have in the convention center in light of today's issues with safety and everything else. We want to have those mags so when people come in, they can better control what's coming in and out of the convention center. Over at Livestock, we put in, or excuse me, at the Reno Event Center, we put in some money for some extra lighting, better lighting, LED lighting on the back truck dock on the north side of the building. Vehicle replacement, we've got a few vehicles with the different properties that are 20+ years or older, and they're costing us more in maintenance. They're starting to wear out, so we are funding, or trying to get funding to replace some of those vehicles. Anybody have any questions on anything in particular?
So Fred, you already mentioned it earlier, the main differences as we look at what the finance committee, what we saw in the right-hand column compared to the revised plan with the, should we approve the track, are primarily the parking lot resurfacing, the office windows.
No, that one, which, well, yes, sorry. It would be the AMR meetings or
Okay, restrooms and the, okay, so on the office windows at the convention center, those show a 0 on the revised.
Yeah, we can skip over that. That is, it affects 3 offices.
Okay,
On the east side of the property.
okay, so those were waiting on, those were taken off
Correct.
as well. I'm just looking at where there were changes from the original to what we're proposed today.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Madam Chair,
Yes,
just one quick question, clarification, the 4.2 million capital, that is somewhat aligned with the 10% of board policy cap expenditures on an annual basis. And that 10% is generated off of the total room revenue countywide.
Total room tax collection for the RSCVA, so we look at our portion.
Tax collections, but countywide. Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead, Courtney. Great, so if there's no other questions on the proposed capital list. We look forward to talk just a little bit more about the indoor track. I wanted to talk about the financing. Let's wrap another question.
Ms.
Frost, you have a CapEx question?
Yes, on the livestock event center, because we had talked about this, and I think even the folks from the rodeo, I mean, so we're not gonna do the part where there's severe wear on the pavement. I mean, it's falling apart over there.
Spence, can you answer that?
Yeah, yes, part of the reasoning on that is they're still looking, Western Heritage is still looking at doing modifications over there to the property. And it was an easier decision to delay that if they decide to delay their expansion. If they go through with the expansion fairly soon, then we're saving money because they're gonna tear up the pavement anyway. So in the meantime, we would go in there and do some more fills on the tracks that are existing.
Okay.
So do they know that we've taken this out of the budget, that group?
Well, right now, this is the discussion we're having right now, so it hasn't gone any further than this room.
But you're asking us to adopt it today.
Correct.
I'm not so sure though, are they expecting it either? Just as I don't know if they're aware of our budget.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. No, this is something that we've just proposed internally.
Right.
This hasn't gone out to any other organization or any of the groups that utilize that space.
And then just another question, the REC, and I think I bring this up every other meeting, the sign, I mean, it's falling apart. It looks terrible when we're bringing in events there. Is there any funds in this budget in CapEx on that sign?
There is nothing on this CapEx, and we were trying to discuss this with the city of Reno on seeing if they were going to put that into their capital. So that's still a discussion that we're having with the city manager.
Yeah, I would say probably not, and we need to get on that sign like yesterday. That is the one thing like that I keep hearing from everyone, hey, that sign, that sign, that sign. I just feel like downtown is always sort of the stepchild. So, I mean, it always feels like it's, you know, just like pulling teeth to get, put anything into those. So I don't know, we've been talking about that for a long time.
Well, in this sense, the event center is owned by the city of Reno, so our obligation as RSCVA for the bowling center and the event center is up to
$10,000 a week.
$10,000, but we put more into both. But really, it's not our property, it's the city of Reno. So I think that's why Trent's been trying to work with city of Reno, because we know it needs to be fixed. So we need to get it fixed.
Well,
And how does that happen?
and a point for clarification. So to make sure that we're a partner in that, we allocated $500,000 out of this budget for the suites. So we are participating, even though it's not ours, we are participating in improvements to that facility specifically since those suites haven't been touched.
That facility is meant to benefit tourism, all
sure.
room
Correct.
tax and those things.
Right.
So I would also say the suites, I think there should have been a discussion, do we want to fix a sign that everyone sees or only the elite in the suites?
Well, I think the
I'm
same
sorry.
conversation has been on the agenda
I'm sorry,
before,
that-
as me. That's
seems like a
how long have you
no-brainer.
been talking about the sign?
Forever, but
And
that's,
you've been trying to talk with the city of Reno to see if we're doing a big investment inside. You know, the city of Reno owns that building, so what is the city going to do? Because it is your building. You know, Mr. Murdoch.
Oh, it is, but also, it is also all of our responsibility because it's part of that contract. You guys also play a major role in that, so you can't act like you're not our partner there.
Well, no, we operate it, but you
So-
own it, so.
And
the agreement-
and also it makes all of us look bad. So the fact that we don't want to take care of a sign, I mean, to me, that looks like, first impressions count. Signage is super important. Anyone that knows branding, I mean, and, an expert at branding, you know how critical signage is. That gives us, I mean, so many people, thousands of people, I would say, would see that signage. It doesn't look good. It doesn't put our best foot forward. So that's what I'm saying, when we talk about suites, I'm sorry, that caters to a totally different person than everyone else that signage should cater to.
Just thinking out loud a little bit, when we've got the boulders downtown, 50,000 of them through July. And kind of important that sign, but what I'm thinking is, as much money as paying the site fees, road turns around and sends $10 out per bowler back out here for amount of $400,000. That alone right there, that, you know what I'm trying to say? That could go to, we're sending another extra, and we're paying another site fee on top of that to the bowler. So it's the most, we pay more than any other property's ever paid for a piece of business. And I think I'm just asking just to fix the sign. Could we do that?
Like, also paint is so important, right? It's the same sort of concept, right? I mean, you want something to look good. It's like painting a building. We all want to put our best foot forward. So I don't want it to be sort of, it's constantly the sort of us and them. It's all in our backyard. We're not a big enough city to where we should ever be divided. If they're coming to Sparks, Charlene, they're coming to Reno to check it out. And my community comes to Sparks all the time. Right? So I just think it's a reflection on all of us. We should all be rooting for each other.
Do we have an amount on the sign?
It's $180,000 of what we bid it out, to install a new sign.
So-
Roughly.
Can we amend this to, I mean, this is a public hearing, to add that sign to the budget? Yes, Ben?
Commissioner Hill.
I think that, Washoe, we could talk to Reno and support something, Madam Mayor, offline.
Thank you so
Let's
much.
be a partner.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Elected. I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Well, or take it a step further and go three-way. I mean, I agree. I
I
think.
don't want to call it Sparks and Fort Savage,
no,
but
no,
I'm
no.
saying
I'm not
I would.
saying-
be a partner.
I'm just calling out the
Room tax is room tax. We don't care who generates it. It could be anybody.
Reach on.
Marks.
Yeah, we just approved our budget, this is not in it, but let's talk
Just
about
like,
it.
we're
Yeah.
supportive of Andy when he wanted to do what he needed to do.
Yeah.
Like, I don't understand why this should be so difficult.
Well, and actually, how long, Trent, you have been trying to work with Reno on both properties? Because we can't
Well,
just.
you, as the chair, then you should bring it to me, Charlene, because your job as chair, bring everyone together. If you're not getting what you need, you come right to me. I'm happy to pick up the phone
Well,
anytime.
and I knew conversations have been going on with Trent, with the city of Reno, with the city manager. And I've not gotten an update on, we've been working this whole year on everything that we need for the event center and the
Well,
bowling
if you're
center.
not getting it, then you come right to me. You should pick up that phone anytime. I will gladly answer it. You should know that.
Okay,
I never hear from you. So if you're
Okay.
having issues with
well,
communication.
and I
with the
did
city,
not know
you
that
need to
Reno
come to me.
still, I did not know.
Okay,
The
well, then
city
come to me
manager
next time
had
as
not
chair.
approved it.
That would be
Last I knew,
helpful.
it was it was in his hands and.
Well, Madam Chair, this
Madam
discussion is a staff discussion, and I think that's where
Yeah,
it
it
has
is.
resided until it
Mhm.
needs to come above staff discussion, which maybe today it has. So
Mhm.
those discussions is not a 30,000-foot board level discussion. That's a staff discussion.
It is,
And that's
and
what
staff has
belongs,
been
and that's
working
where it
on it.
needs to stay.
Yeah,
I mean,
and
if we're
I
not
do
making
respect-
progress, then we can have a conversation.
Yeah, so, and you're right, Andy, and that's where it has been.
Yep.
It's been staff,
Appropriately
it's
so.
been Fran, working with the city of Reno.
But Madam
We're-
Chair, I have been bringing this up and I think it's important for the capital projects. This should be no surprise. I think for the amount, 180,000 out of our budget, this sign is important. It's important for the community. I don't know if we can allocate some and then maybe we do like we did with the scoreboards, do maybe some match with the city of Reno where they put in out of the $2 surcharge, because I know that fund, I mean, all the bowlers are in town, but I would I would advocate strongly that that sign gets put in. I would do the same thing for any of the facilities, livestock event center, all of them, because they're tourism facilities, but that sign is an eyesore, quite frankly. It doesn't look good, and I think it needs to be included in this budget.
If I could just say something, we allocated about $500,000 for a new video board in the bowling center. We have now, through this board, approved an additional $500,000 for the suites. If this board wants to participate further and do that, even though it's a city-owned building, then that's something that we need to go back and find additional money. If this board says this has to come from the city, then we need some direction from the board at this point.
Well, I think we could allocate an amount in concept that there's a partnership, right? That if it's 180, which actually that sounds like, oh, that bid is still fresh. But it seems like a good number. I mean, I'd propose us budgeting, you know, whether it's 60, 75, 60, a little buffer.
Okay, Doug, you're on speakerphone. I would like you to relay that to Charles. Evidently, Doug had lunch with you 2 weeks ago,
And I asked for things in writing and I didn't get anything in writing yet.
because he said opposite. Go ahead, Doug.
That's not, I'm sorry, as a board member, that's not appropriate. That's not appropriate.
Yes, it is appropriate, because I want to know the truth. If my staff isn't getting back to what you need, then I need to know about
That
it.
is not appropriate.
It is
I think we
appropriate.
get a little off agenda here. I think we need to focus on.
It's appropriate.
It's not.
It is my job to make sure my staff is
As a
getting. what
board
they
member,
need.
I don't believe that's appropriate.
Well, I'm sorry, it's appropriate whenever I
Guys,
don't.
Madam Chair, can we get this meeting back on track? I think we were, if we could get some allocation for the sign, I mean, we all have our opinions. If we could vote on that,
Okay, hang on, yes, we're moving, I'm gonna pull us back on.
No, Doug
I'm gonna
said
have
he would pay for it. He said he told you he would pay for it. You just needed to get him who you were using, what contractor, all of that.
Trent has that, and he's been waiting on the $2 committee to go through that and to finish that off.
allocation.
Okay, so that item is taken care of, Mr. Kennedy.
I think it's good. I was just gonna sort of give everybody the baseline explanation of the
Okay.
contract and responsibilities and the board's
Okay.
options, but if the
I don't think we need,
then-
I don't think we need it then. Okay, we're good to go.
You're good. We
Thank
just
you.
have to hold people
Thank
accountable
you.
and then we get it done.
Okay, awesome. Awesome, it does need to be done, for sure.
Madam Chair, may I
Yes.
make one, before we get off the Capitol, I just want to make one comment. From what I understand, and I believe Courtney confirmed this, about 14% of the total room revenue tax collections in the budget are generated in Washoe B. About 14%, and about 10% of the total revenues are going to CapEx. You know, and we don't have any properties. The RSCVA doesn't have any properties up in the incline area. So when I did my calculation, that's about $600,000 of this CapEx. If we look at the percentages that are generated out of Washoe B, and we don't come and ask for much, but we're not getting, there's no properties up there. I understand that. It's a big hat we're wearing here, and I get that. But I think we also have to be conscious that there are other needs, and we are going to talk about that. I'm going to bring that up later in this budget conversation as well. But, you know, there are needs beyond just the properties that are owned and the CapEx needs when we look at where revenue is generated and return to source. Just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. Okay, so are we good on CapEx? Can we move on to let Courtney move on?
Yeah, there's a little bit more discussion within the CapEx presentation. Just for clarity, does the board want to make any amendments to this list for a placeholder for the sign? We do have $310,000 in reserves. We could just use that as a placeholder pending for funding if we need to do that. Just want to be clear so that I.
I would recommend.
Perfect, okay, so then out of the $310,000 in reserves, we'll reserve 180 of that for the sign pending.
1/3.
Why the full amount? I think
Depends
putting
on other-
something.
I would say 1/3.
Okay, so we'll go for 1/3. Just need clarity on my end for our documentation. Great.
The other thing, I just want to bring up the office furniture. Where is that going exactly? 350,000.
Trent?
That office furniture is for all of the offices here in this property and over the convention center. The furniture, if you go through any of the offices, is 5+ years old.
Mhm.
A lot of it is splintering. Some of the people, when they're under their desk, if they rotate their chair, they're tearing their clothes. And we've got,
I don't deny that. Have you gotten, bids on that?
not at this point,
You
this
guys
is
go
just.
out and just,
no,
you're
this
just
is
saying
a
approximately?
proposal, so we can go
Okay,
out
it just
there.
seems like a lot, 350,000.
Well, we're looking at approximately 70 to 74 offices between the two properties.
Okay. Do
And
you sort of assess them or do you go, how does that work? Are you just saying everyone's getting
we were
new?
looking at the entire thing so we could match everything. The furniture that's in there now is old. It's not produced anymore, so we'd have to go with a different format. Maybe different coloring, something that there's some unity. So it's just based on some of the desks that we have bought recently.
Mhm.
This would be taking those and upscaling them a little bit with chairs, tables, bookshelves. It's not just the desk.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Courtney?
Okay, we'll go ahead and move forward. I don't know if the board wants to resume any discussions about the track right now or just continue to move forward without discussing that more. We can just move forward to the rest of the presentation and maybe come back to that if the desire is to move forward quickly. So we wanted to just touch quickly on carry forward capital projects. These are the projects we budgeted during fiscal year 23. It's typical for capital projects to take longer than a year to complete. Each year, we usually have projects that overlap between fiscal years, and this year we saw additional delays due to labor and supply shortages. So again, we're not asking for additional funding here. We just wanted to update the board on how projects were looking that we budgeted during fiscal year 23. You have this list in your packet as well, but these are the projects that were completed so far during fiscal year 23. If there's any specific questions on these, Trent can answer those. None. We'll move on. These are the projects that are being carried forward. This is the same list that's in your packet on page 7. We talked about this when the fiscal year 23 budget was presented, but if there are any questions on the projects being carried forward, we can take those down. All right.
Any questions? Okay.
Okay, great. So we'll go ahead and move on to the full budget. You
I
can
just
turn to-
ask one more on the CapEx. Are we doing, I said you skipped the track portion, but part of it was, I think this goes back to Commissioner Hill's comment from earlier, but part of the track on the actual equipment that's made in the USA, I noticed in the bid. Is that something, I know that they're giving preference for that. Is that something we can get a grant for that portion? Because it's 400,000 on that equipment.
So definitely we're going to research grant funding based on if the bid is approved by the board or if the direction is to research funding ahead of that. We did receive the bids on May 9th. It did not receive a payment schedule until May 12th. So we're still in the process of researching any of our options.
Go ahead, Courtney, let's move on to the proposed budget.
Okay, so you can turn to the budget tab in your binder. Quick overview of how the budget presentation will be structured. We'll start with the strategic plan funding policies, move on to general fund revenues and reserves, then general fund expenses, and talk briefly about the other lines. The budget is largely guided by the board's funding policies for the strategic plan. So we'll start with the discussion of how those policies will be addressed in this budget. So this is the same information that is found on page 3 of the budget section of your binder. First is the policy related to general fund reserves. Policies related to general fund reserves have been in place for many years, and the current policy calls for 15 to 17% of expenditures to be maintained in ending fund balances, which is about 2 months of operating expenses. The budget supports that amount, but it also depends on activity throughout the year. Fund balance is reconciled at year end, and each year we report back to the board on that audited fund balance figure. And like we already discussed, the next policy directs us to dedicate up to 10% of annual room tax collections towards capital expenditures. We are meeting this policy and have already discussed capital funding in detail. Next is the rainy day fund. The board's policy sets the rainy day fund at up to $2 million. The current balance in the rainy day fund supports this policy, and we're planning for a 10 to 20% increase in fiscal year 24. Next is the capital reserve account. The ending fund balance in capital projects fund is projected to be this goal. So next are board initiatives, which are on page 4. The two current board initiatives to be funded in this budget are air service and special events. Air service funding was established as part of the previous strategic plan to support airlift, and additional dedicated special event funding was established by the board in fiscal year 22. This year, we're proposing $750,000 in air service funding and $1 million in special event funding. And as part of today's discussion, we'll also need the board's direction on air service spending. So we discussed this with the finance committee during our meeting with them on May 9th, but originally the strategic plan issued during 2016 designated the air service fund to be spent on the direct support of new and expanded routes, primarily through mitigation agreements. There were some informal discussions earlier in the year about possibly using the air service fund for other activities. We haven't had those opportunities for new airlift brought to us in several years. So the CEO is proposing that we start to spend the air service fund on marketing activities like paid advertising and education efforts. If we do spend from the air service fund on marketing efforts related to airlift, that would mean less air service funding would be immediately available if a new opportunity for airlift was brought to us. So essentially, we need the board's direction on air service funding going forward, because the only authorization we have currently is to spend it on new or expanded airlift. We had a great discussion with the finance committee. The committee supports using the air service fund to support both existing and new airlift. And they do support using the air service fund for other activities that support air service, but they did want to emphasize that our highest priority of spending needs to be those new or existing routes. So the committee is encouraging discussion by the full board, and Stephen, you can chime in.
So thank you, Courtney. Just to add a little color to the discussion we had in finance committee regarding the air service fund. And this is something it seems like we've wrestled with as far as the right opportunity isn't there. How do, we've got this pot of money that it was a heavy legislative lift. We got that on. I think, and this is why we wanted to bring it to the full board for their input. To Courtney's point, it's pretty defined that it's on new routes, new service. I think in concept, we were good with if there's a piece of that budget, instead of saying strictly it's new flights, new budget, it might be a social media campaign on a flight route. It might be a social media campaign with Southwest Airlines out of there.
Yeah.
So we wanted to be able to loosen that up, but not necessarily direct it away. We want to keep it with the air service. And correct me if I'm wrong, Courtney, but we've budgeted 750, but legislative, aren't we allowed to go up to 1.5? If we really had it, if we got things going in future years, that budget could be a lot more than 750, but and I know, Charles, I don't think you wanted to spend it all on a marketing campaign either.
Correct.
We would hold something aside that if we did have an opportunity come up, we'd have a portion of that put aside, but.
And part of that also towards education as well, not just straight marketing as well, but yes.
When we say education.
Educating our industry leaders from the airlines about the importance of long haul direct routes, such as the FAMs that came in, that we've been supporting, things like that, but never going through and spending all those dollars.
I don't know if that clarified anything. Thanks, Courtney, though.
Is there other board questions or input? I thought you were, Dan, you look like the hand is coming up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say, I think that flexibility that Stephen's talked about, and obviously Charles has recommended, is very important, because we don't know what we'll need to support until we're told by the airport authority that we need marketing, we need to do an education or branding effort. So I think it is important that the definition of how we're spending that money is a little broader and gives us that flexibility.
Okay, Mr. Murdoch.
Again, we went and it was a heavy lift to get it done for the 1.5 max. We give RASC $250,000 as an agency. RASC is this mechanism sitting over here. We've lost some players in the RASC. Might be time to relook at all of how RASC is working and how the RSCVA funding is working. Might be time to take a fresh look at that. I know Stephen and we kicked it around, but here's another thing is it's up to And I think the airport could be good at this if they would go to the Southwest or to the Alaskas or to the, what airlines need us to do some campaigns that drive bodies to this community. So we got to put ourselves on the offensive with them to say, we got some money, how do you want to, and if they don't come back, then, it makes it easier for us. But RASC, there's not been an ask, there's no minimum revenue guarantees right now. And we're just sitting here going, okay, that money, it evaporates, doesn't it, Courtney, after we don't use it, it just evaporates and starts over again. And
We started over each year, so
Yeah.
yes.
so there's money.
Christina, did you want to address any of the marketing side of this?
Yeah, I can, as part of our annual plan that we approved at the beginning of the year, the board did approve to spend money on directly with airlines, specifically with JetBlue. And just to update everyone, we did do a media buy in partnership with JetBlue and their media team. We've also spent money directly with American Airlines. And to your point, Mr. Murdoch, is going directly to the airlines and what do you guys need? How can we help you? What influencers can we bring here? We've brought in now, I think, 4 influencers with partnership with American Airlines. And we did present some of this. Some of you guys are on the executive committee for RASC. So I highlighted a few of these items, but we are on that road of promoting nonstop flights from our direct service cities and using marketing funds to specifically for air service to help our airline partners and continue the growth of our airlines. And just real quick on the airline education element, yes, we did partner with the airport to host a recent FAM hosting airline executives from a number of airlines as well. And that was a partnership we had been working on with them to get them to come here and help show them our destination and all the reasons why, and to educate them on funding opportunities.
Aren't you hiring an air consultant as well?
Yes, we
Yes.
are.
So could you elaborate with the board on what you're doing?
Yes, so we have contracted with an airline consultant, Avalon Pacific, and they work with DMOs directly, just to update everyone. So they've worked with our airport, they've worked with airports, they work with the Harry Reid Airport in Las Vegas, and they work with Palm Springs, they work with a number of airports and also DMOs. And so they are drafting a strategy for us that they'll get back to us at the end of July with a DMO specific recommendation on where should we get these nonstop routes? What airports should we partner with that will benefit both of us, as they have eyes and ears on not only DMOs and airports, where we can partner together with all of these entities and do a beneficial nonstop service that helps all of us. So I will have that at the end of July and definitely bring it to the board.
If I may, it's important that we've got 3 entities out there. You've got the airport entity, you got the RASC entity, and you got the RSCVA. It's time the 3 came together to figure out how to get a little more creative. We're sitting on a lot of money, and if we're not going to use it, we could use it here in the RSCVA system. So I'm just saying, this is really important. It's time to go for a relook. RASC has been around for a lot of years. We've again lost some players in the RASC deal. Let's figure out how we can all make this better for everybody, all communities, all airlines,
Absolutely.
and RSCVA.
Mr. Murdoch, I support what you're talking about wholeheartedly. That benefits everyone on a go-forward basis.
Mr. Check.
I just wanted, on the RASC, just to, and a little clarification, there's about an $800,000 annual budget for RASC, and we're sitting at a current of about 1.2 million. And true, we haven't had any mitigation ask recently, but that doesn't mean there isn't one around the corner. So from a standpoint of this particular item, I think we do need to make sure we are holding off a percentage, whether that's 25% or 50%. We had those discussions at finance. We can get there. I would though, Mr. Murdoch, there are 2 other DMO entities in the region that invest in long haul marketing, air service supported cities, North Lake Tahoe and South Lake Tahoe. We're spending significant dollars in those markets. We no longer market to the rubber tire Bay Area market, and haven't for probably 5 years. So all of our dollars from the paid media standpoint are invested in long haul flight markets. So it is not just the RSCVA and RASC, it is the North Lake Tahoe and South Lake Tahoe bureaus as well. So it is a broader. So let's look at it as the whole.
We do.
No, I know. No, when we start talking about getting folks together, because there's significant money being spent in those markets beyond just the RSCVA and RASC is my point.
It's South Shore, it's North Shore,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
same plan. We got a lot out there, but it seems like we need to pull in all these entities and figure out the best strategy, because the airport's hiring a consultant, they're hiring a
Yeah.
consultant.
And we
Trying
are
to
working
get
with the airport
focus.
and collaborating on who we are working with, so we are complementary, not working against each other.
Duplicate.
Yeah, exactly.
And Madam Chair, as the airport rep, just couple things on that. I agree with Mr. The whole thing with the RASC and the board members, losing some members of the RASC. I guess my concern is actually going down to the 750. Just speaking on the airport side, and CEO is leaving that funding at $1 million. I agree with Mr. Chapman. There may be a minimum revenue guarantee asked pretty soon. So I don't know if that's something that could be augmented but the tax is specifically set up for air service. So if something comes through in the future, are we limiting ourselves by the 750,000 would be my question. And was the $1 million presented to the RASC?
I don't know about the RASC.
No.
I'll just speak to it as the finance committee. I think we need some number to kind of agree upon. I think 750 would probably be adequate, and if we have to augment, come back for something extra. It's your point. I don't know what that right percentage is, saying this can be used for beyond mitigation, but I think the big, and this is exactly why we wanted to kick it to the full group, because it's a little bit in the art of how do we want to massage this and be using it for something other than just mitigation. But to your point, Jessica, knowing there might be an opportunity, maybe we go a little more conservative on how much we're releasing out.
Yeah, Mr. Kennedy.
Maybe I can lay out some options to sort of move it along and focus it. So I think we're talking about funding the air service fund bucket. So we can approve that funding for the budget and leave it at that. If the board wants to go further and say out of that bucket, here's the percentage that we want to make available for marketing, you can do that today as well, but you don't have to. You could also fund the bucket and say, staff, come back to us at a future meeting and let us know how you would propose to use this money if we were to free it up for marketing, and you can make that decision down the road. So if it's not a decision you have to make today, you can, but just want to sort of throw it out there so we're all on the same page.
So then the proposal coming out of finance really to the board without setting a percentage was the ability to expand the utilization of this fund. That it wouldn't just be what it's always been, but is the board comfortable with us talking about whether it's marketing and education, that we have the ability to do that? Not necessarily have to set a percentage today, but really finance committee, that was our recommendation to the board, and to see if the board is on board with doing that, to give us a little more flexibility with the funding as more opportunities. So this, it's not a separate motion. We're doing, this will all fall under the budget.
Right, so I guess based on what I'm hearing, I think my recommendation would be we approve funding the air service fund with the amount that's been proposed. And then at a future meeting, maybe Christina comes back with a proposal of here's how I would propose to spend X% of their service fund on marketing. We can have that discussion there when you have a plan in front of you.
If I ask, and will you include, I would ask that you would include the airport, you would include the DMOs that are putting money in to the right,
Right.
You should get a lot of feedback from all the regions.
I am talking very closely with all of them.
Yeah.
Okay.
I will say that I would hope to get clarity based on this fiscal year in the proper spending of the air service fund. I would say that I was under the impression, based on some of the things that were approved by this board, that says in our annual plan, we approved to distribute air monies from air service fund to acquire, maintain, or expand flights targeting airline education, long haul service, and JetBlue flights through media promotions, sales, and tourism. And so I have gone out and done some media buys, and basically, as I'm approaching the end of the fiscal year, I would love clarity on if it needs to come out of my media spend, leisure media spend, or if it can come out of this bucket
here that ends at the end of next month.
And just as a point of reference, the board actually goaled me as part of that and put that in to spend money to help support the JetBlue education in other areas. The disconnect here is I think we needed a formal vote to say yes, and that's why it's coming back up now, that we need that support in order to do that, which people have said, go out and support JetBlue, keep those routes in place, but don't spend it all, and that's, I think we need a formal vote. Is that,
Yes.
thank you.
That is a separate motion.
Well, I don't know the word.
It's not a,
Yeah, I mean, right, today we're approving the
The budget,
23-24 fiscal year budget. And you're talking about 22-23 funds.
Wouldn't the approval of that goal and the annual effort provide that?
I think that was a reasonable,
That's with the board discussion, right?
yeah, I mean, I think that was a reasonable interpretation. I'm not saying, yeah, I think that's what the goal, along with the discussions, support that. The board's never taken,
On July 1st.
right, correct, it's never taken action. We can always agendize it in a future meeting to just sort of ratify the 2022-2023.
we were given direction, there's no, just not a formal vote.
Right.
Is where the,
So I would,
are we going to just continue with the budget?
yes, I would just focus on the budget and we
Okay.
can address that.
Okay, Courtney, go.
Great, all right, so we'll move on from this and we'll talk about general fund revenues and resources, which is how the budget is funded. So this is the composition of general fund revenues and resources for the budget year compared to the current year. The largest portion of our revenues is room tax, which consists of collection and the tourism surcharge. Next are facilities revenues, and the next highest component is carry forward fund balance, which is essentially amounts that were budgeted in fiscal year 23, and we likely won't be spending in the current year, such as the board designated special event opportunity funding. This also consists of Q4 revenues that will likely exceed budget. Carry forward amounts are almost always a component of our budget and are $3.9 million this year. Other revenues are $1.3 million and consist of certain administrative fees we collect and smaller revenues generated by departments. And here we have a comparison to pre-pandemic. In total, revenues and resources for fiscal year 24 are $56.4 million compared to $53.1 million pre-pandemic. This is the same chart that you have on page 6 of the binder. So next, we'll review the fiscal year 24 revenue estimates in detail. So first, we'll review our budget for room tax revenues. These were estimated using trend analysis over average daily room rates, collections in prior periods, market segment trends, and other economic considerations. We prepared and reviewed different scenarios and ultimately decided to be slightly conservative. Like I mentioned in the budget binder, there are still trends we're keeping an eye on at both the local and national level that we think could lead to slight decreases in room tax revenues. And if we find that revenues are coming in under budget, internally we readjust and react quickly. If we find that revenues come in above budget, that's something we review with the finance committee and proceed accordingly, either with an augmentation or other uses of the funds. Overall, we're still in somewhat uncertain times and we're placing an emphasis on closely monitoring performance and trends. So here we have historical room tax revenues. Again, we have 2 years in a row where revenues have exceeded pre-pandemic, and we expect to continue this trend for fiscal year 24. Next, we'll review certain room tax statistics. This is also on page 8 of the binder. Our increases in room tax revenues have been heavily driven by the average daily room rates. Year to date, ADR is about 26% higher than pre-pandemic. Occupancy percentages, however, are lower than pre-pandemic, as are occupied rooms. You'll see we took a moderate approach and budgeted for a slight decrease in ADR as we continue to monitor and see what the new normal looks like for those rates. So here's the total breakdown of revenues by market segment. We've seen a slight shift in trends, most notably vacation rentals are seeing a lot of growth. Pre-pandemic, vacation rentals were about 5% of total taxable room revenues. Last year, they were 9% of the total, and year to date, they're 10%. Here we have occupied rooms by market segment. We've projected decreases in our budget in those segments, except for vacation rentals. And again, this is based on trends. Overall, we budgeted for a decline in average daily room rates, and this is a breakdown of those rates by category. So here we have a comparison of facilities revenues by facility and category, and this is in your budget binder on page 9. For facility rental revenues, we based these off the estimates that were prepared by the sales department. Concessions and catering revenue estimates were prepared by Aramark, and the other revenues category consists of parking revenues, AV charges, internet charges, and other services. These were budgeted based on the current trends that we're seeing through these revenues in relation to events. All of these estimates were based on the actual events booked at the time the budget was prepared, and revenues are estimated at over $7.2 million for fiscal year 24. We'll talk about facilities expenses later on in the presentation, but I wanted to give the board an overview of our loss projections for the year compared to prior years, also found on page 11 of your budget book. We're budgeting for a 4% decrease in the total facilities loss figure compared to what was budgeted for the current fiscal year. This was still challenging to achieve given the large increases we've seen in areas such as utilities, temporary labor, and overall inflation, which has increased over 19% since the pandemic. And we'll discuss this more when we go into the detail of facilities expenses. The sharp increases in utilities and inflation were two of the more unexpected challenges we run into with the facilities transition that impact our expenses and losses. But we've also had a lot of successes as part of the transition. We discussed some of these briefly with the committee, and the committee asked that we highlight to the board some of the successes that we've noted since the transition. So first, we've seen an overall 15% increase in events from fiscal year 22 to 23. This can be attributed to our sales and event staff actively selling the slower periods, providing higher occupancy for the facilities. This is also translated to higher revenues. Facilities revenues through March 23 are $1.5 million higher than the same period during the previous fiscal year. We've also had the ability to implement operational programs to ensure that preventative maintenance is being performed timely and not being deferred, since we did experience a lot of deferred maintenance issues with the prior management contract. You'll know, we've talked about this before, but we had a lot of turnover during the management contract of the facilities, but that's been an opportunity for us to hire key operational staff with extensive experience and knowledge of the facilities, and also restructure certain areas as needed. And also we've focused on operational consistency between the four facilities too. Next, we'll talk about other revenues. Like I mentioned, other revenues consist of certain administrative fees, smaller revenues generated by the departments, and interest earnings. This year, other revenues include the amounts paid to the RSCVA by hotels related to the 24 Women's Championship for USDC. And again, carry forward fund balance. We discussed this in detail. These are the amounts that we anticipate we will not spend during fiscal year 23. We'll carry forward to that ending fund balance amount to be spent in fiscal year 24.
Courtney, just so I understand better how carry forward fund balance works.
Yeah.
So we have almost 4 million moving into this fiscal, but that's part of the plan, correct? That we've allocated how that's going to be spent.
We have, yeah, we don't want to sit idly on those resources. So when we're planning for the fiscal year 24 budget, we take a hard look at fiscal year 23 and say, okay, where are we really at? Where are we coming in under budget? What are revenues looking like? What can we spend in this next fiscal year? So we're not just sitting on that money.
Yeah. I was looking for a track. I need money to buy a track.
Oh,
We've had this discussion about doing something.
Commissioner, thank you. Revenues, I just want to make a note that Washington County is still looking at our regulations for, we call them short-term rentals, you call them vacation rentals. So there could be some changes, but the way that you projected it, it looks like it should be fine. But I did want staff to note that, and please stay in touch with our staff and pay attention as the county is moving forward with those potential changes, since 90% are in our jurisdiction.
Absolutely. Thank you. All right, great. So we've covered revenues in a lot of detail, and now we're going to move on to general fund expenses. So here we have an overview of general fund expenses by department and by operating category. The largest area for our expenses is marketing, followed by the facilities, and then sales. Our largest category of spending is payroll and related costs, with promotion and advertising being our second highest category. And we'll go into detail regarding spending by department and category next. Here we have a breakdown of payroll and related expenses. Facilities are 39% of our total payroll, and sales is 30%, which makes up the bulk of our payroll spending. As a reminder, facility staff are now reflected as payroll expenses, but during our contract, those were reported as contractual costs. So I recommend for fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 14. The fiscal year 23 and fiscal year 19. So we presented our budget on May 9th to the finance committee. One item that the CEO wanted to bring to the committee's attention was the proposed cost of living adjustment for all staff. So for fiscal year 24, we're proposing a 4% cost of living adjustment that is included in the budget as presented. The committee also asked that we present our comparisons of RSCVA COLAs to inflation and to other governments when we presented this to the full board. So from period of January 2019 to April 2024, we noted that inflation had increased 20.52%. In that time, we've given staff a total of 10% of COLAs. We also compared to 2 other local governments and noted that we had lower COLAs than those governments as well. So overall, we're still more conservative with our COLAs than inflation and our peers. Within the budget, approximately $496,000 would go towards that COLA, and that is included as presented. We've also budgeted merit increases for qualifying staff of up to 3%. And this year, Nevada PERS is increasing their contribution rate, which impacts our benefits costs. And as noted in the board packet, we added several new positions during the year, so we'll have the full impact of those new positions in our budget this year.
On the PERS increase, does RSCVA absorb 100% of that, or is it split with the employee?
100% to RSCVA.
So what's the fiscal impact, the line item on that? Because that's a huge increase, 4%. What is that projected to be?
I can pull that number if you can give us the minutes.
You know, while Courtney's doing that, just from the finance committee standpoint, again, this kind of fell in like the air service. We needed a approval to move this forward, and again, I think we were in agreement that we're in the range, but wanted to tee it up for the discussion for the full group, and even on that, just to clarify too, on the merit increase, that's for qualifying employees, and did we say 0 to 3%?
Is there a number on the merit increase? Is there a number on the merits?
Okay, I'll be right to you, Andy. Please, we're not
Is there a number on the merit increase?
0 to 3%.
Right, I got that, and a number from
For
financial.
budget, what we
Budget, yeah.
would be plugged in.
Would be plugged in.
Yeah, I do have that information. So if every qualifying person got their 3% merit increase, we'd be looking at about $278,000. The increase related to PERS is about $370,000.
She just answered your question.
Yeah, so if every qualifying person got their full 3% merit increase, we'd be looking at about $278,000.
That's thank you.
And the increase related to the PERS contributions is about $370,000.
And, Courtney, can you clarify,
Like it depends on length of service and your review from your supervisor, so you can get up to 3%.
can you clarify, I believe PERS has not increased their contribution for at least 5 years?
I believe it's about 2. There was a more recent contribution, but it wasn't as large as this. I think it went just up 0.5% or 0.3. It wasn't a full 4% increase like the one we're seeing now.
But it hasn't been annual, so that they are catching up.
Correct.
And COLA goes to everything, correct?
No,
Full of everything.
oh, yes, that is.
Yeah, Mary.
Yeah, the other ones are
Yeah, the other one is earned by,
earned based on yearly goals,
okay,
and they have to achieve those.
no, that was good, Charles, I think you put that in. Yeah,
We
that
have
was a
plans
nice-
for every
that was a
company.
nice structure that we did.
Okay, we're good, Courtney. Great, all right, so we'll move on to services and supplies, which is on page 16 of your binder. The majority of this category is related to facilities expenses, which we have further broken out on the screen. For facilities, services and supplies have been really heavily impacted by the overall cost increases we've seen due to inflation. We've seen increases of 16 to 40% in our utility bills, and inflation impacts all of these other categories as well. If we see cost increases that are on track with what we saw this last fiscal year, this expense number and the total facilities loss figure would need to be revised. It's something we're watching closely. Also, if activity at the facilities is higher than anticipated, we'll need to augment expenses similar to how we did this year, since increased activity means that all the associated categories increase as well. So we'll continue to monitor this really closely like we're doing in the current fiscal year, and we bring anything that warrants attention to the finance committee and to the board. We're also anticipating increases in general liability insurance, but we're still waiting to receive those good quotes, those final quotes. We put in a good amount of work to mitigate those increases, such as implementing enhanced cybersecurity controls, since those controls are evaluated when insurers are quoting us. The full insurance renewal will be brought to the board for approval once those quotes are received and evaluated. Within this line item, the smaller remainder of the category includes contracted services, equipment leases, dues, legal fees, supplies, and other services. So travel and entertainment is budgeted at 126% of the prior year and over 150% of pre-pandemic levels, with 84% of travel related to the sales department. This line item has also been impacted by inflation and the large fluctuations in airfare prices. You'll see small increases in travel and entertainment for other departments, and those are to provide opportunities to staff for networking and professional development. So next is promotions and advertising. This line item is budgeted at 113% of pre-pandemic levels, with the majority of spending in marketing. In marketing, we have $5.4 million budgeted in leisure media buys, which is consistent with prior spending levels. We have $1 million in agency of record and media buying fees, which have increased due to the new anticipated contract and new services provided within that contract. We have $750,000 budgeted for air service, which we already discussed. We also have a 71% increase in website and related costs. This is due to the new website, which was approved by the board at the previous meeting. Within this line item, we've also budgeted $150,000 towards the Reno air races, contingent on the negotiation of a sponsorship package. Special projects is historically where the organization budgets special event funding, event sponsorships, commitments, and related costs. Highlights within this line item include the site fees for the 2024 USDC Women's Championships, a maximum of $250,000 for Miss USA per previous board direction, and $1 million total in special event funding per board direction. The remaining $1 million approximately is spent within the sales department and primarily supports event commitments, sponsorships, and other costs. The apportionment is the amounts that we remit to Incline Village Crystal Bay based on collections in the Washington D tax district. So quickly, we'll discuss the RSCVA's other funds. The capital fund was discussed previously, and we present the capital improvement plan separately for review. Next, we have the insurance fund. These expenses were covered during our discussion of payroll-related benefits. But as you're aware, we have a separate fund that accounts for health insurance and workers' compensation activities. Fund balance in this fund is generally minimal, since some years will have a slight increase, some years will have a slight decrease. These figures will change since they're based on estimates, and we don't go through our health insurance renewal process until later in the year. Lastly is the debt service fund. Transfers to this fund are budgeted at $8.1 million. After principal and interest payments, outstanding debt will be as follows at June 30th, 2024. With that,
That's a slide worth recognizing.
I like that
everybody.
one. Yeah, that's my favorite one right there.
Big compliment to staff and prior boards and prior, I mean, on my first tour of duty, I think we were 140 million.
Yeah.
And sweating every penny. So to see it down to like 50, that's great.
So it's 55 million basically change.
yeah, and principal plus 12 in interest.
That's great.
Good number,
Great
considering
job.
where we were previously.
Yeah.
You did a great job. You did some defeasance.
Yeah, the previous director did one and I did one as well, so.
Thank
it
you.
Worked out very well.
Keep it up.
Okay. Do we have any other questions, or am I ready for a motion?
To accept? Motion to accept?
I do. I've had my hand raised for a while and
I'm
Can I-
sorry, Shannon, we didn't have, I'm sorry, we had the other screen up and I didn't see it. Go ahead,
Okay.
Shannon.
That's okay. So we are budgeting for a decrease in occupancy as well as ADR, and I'm just curious on what's driving that.
We were reviewing trends, especially in the hotel segment, those occupancy numbers have continued to decrease slightly. So based on that and economic factors, we felt it was more important to be conservative in that area.
Okay, so it's just based on recent trends, not from any particular source or publication or other hotels or anything like that?
So definitely we looked at most recent trends. We looked at some of the national indicators that seem to indicate that our recession is still looming. We know that would impact our travel numbers, people coming to our area. So we considered a lot of different factors in making the decision to lower that number rather than increase it.
Okay. And then on the facilities, I know that there was a lot of discussion and everyone was pretty adamant on taking over the facilities ourselves instead of using the third party. And as a result, it looks like our losses continued to grow as opposed to go the other way around. And did we not forecast some of that to happen? Do we expect this to be a short-term increase in losses, or is it going to continue in this direction?
So Shannon, we actually budgeted for a 4% decrease in losses this year. And our goal is to chip away at those losses each year. So this year we budgeted for in fiscal year 23 a $5.9 million loss. We've taken that down to 5.7. We're hoping that we can continue to chip away at those losses as we continue to gain efficiencies. But what's been working against us are those large increases in utilities. I mean, in a single year, when your utility bills go up 16 to 40%, you're just having an uphill battle. It eats away at all the efficiencies that you can gain in other areas. So our goal is for that number to continue to decrease. It's just not decreasing as fast as we'd like it to.
So was the third party in place for the 21-22 fiscal cycle?
Yes, so we took over the facilities in June 2022, so right at the end of fiscal year 22.
Okay, so when they had it, it was a $4.5 million loss. Then we took it and it went to 5.9. And then now we're gonna have it go to 5.7 is what our projection is. Am I understanding that correctly?
So during fiscal year 22, there were not a lot of abnormalities. The contractor wasn't replacing their staff, which was a huge issue. So they had a lot of savings and payroll costs, but the facilities were running not as well as we'd like them to, because they knew that the contract was ending and things were on the way out. They weren't operating it at the full capacity that we would be. I mean, that was also a challenge that we faced, trying to fill open positions quickly because we were running out of talent pools, even from the existing facilities to pull from. So while they saved on the loss figure operationally, it wasn't ideal.
Okay. And then my last question, Courtney, I love that the summary that you always put together for me. Did you have that in this budget presentation, or is that something you can send it to me separate that outlines revenues by category, expenses by category and department, and the net? I know all the information is in the presentation. It's just scattered amongst all the pages. Do you have that roll-up summary?
Yeah, absolutely. I can look at what I provided you previously and send you something very similar.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. I can just include it as an addendum to this. Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, good. So Mayor Sheedy, was that a motion?
Yeah, but I also want to include, because would we include the one in the budget with the track or no?
He's talking to my ear right now.
Okay, that's reading my mind.
Sure, so Jose has confirmed that the bleachers, that bid will remain open through June 30. And that is the soonest one to close. So we've gotten until June 30 to accept the open bid. So I think you've got two options here. You can approve the budget with the track in the budget.
Okay.
And we're off and running. You can't approve the budget. Or you can approve the budget without the track, with direction for the track financing to go through the finance committee to come back before the June 30 deadline to the board. Board can then approve the track, and then we need to revise the budget to account for.
Okay, the only thing I would ask is, so then it goes to finance audit. Okay, after that, we would.
That's come back to special meeting on the
What's,
15th.
that's what I was gonna say, so then you gotta make sure there's another special meeting.
Well, not special meeting.
No, our June
Well, that's what's gonna happen.
Yeah, the
What's
June
date of
meeting,
party?
the June
Okay.
meeting has to go to June 15th, but because we're scheduled for the 22nd, we're calling it a special meeting, but it's not. It's our June meeting.
Okay,
And it's a week earlier than it would normally
So
be,
finance would have to meet before the 15th and then post it to the,
Okay.
correct?
which would give us the time with the June 30th.
So, Madam Chair, so the 15th special meeting as it relates to the discussion on the track, whether approved or not approved today, would to basically present finance options that would come out of the finance committee.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, I think that's the idea. So if the track is not approved today, between now and June 15th, the finance committee would meet. At that June 15th meeting, the finance committee would come back to the board and say, if you want to approve the track on June 15th, here's a plan for how we'll pay for it.
And I think it's the intent of the finance committee is to find those dollars and do some, we have a little bit of time to look into, what's the term?
The state infrastructure.
State infrastructure. Or some other options.
Funding options.
Planning options. Okay, so
Okay, so.
what is your
I
motion?
think my motion, I know, I think my motion will be, I would just include it just in case, and Courtney just identify right now. Let's just say finance is like, okay, I'm good where it's at, right? Like, as we move forward, but we have some time in there. To explore other things, that might not be enough time to really look at if there was another way you wanted to fund it.
I kind of go, and since we've shelved the other item, right, the agenda, I almost feel like it's split where, and again, I don't want it to be a no vote on the track. I wish it
Right,
could
that's
be,
where I'm
I wish it could be
trying to
a pause to say, we're gonna address, take this to the next meeting. So it's not a no. I'm going back to the other agenda.
Find out.
What's that? But I do think we're gonna find, I just think it gives us time to, without reopening it all here, we're gonna
Okay, so
reshuffle.
predicating on finance committee.
I would almost approve the budget as is without the track.
Without
Yeah.
tracking, how did you word that? Because I think that was.
So I think if that's the case, I think the process, I'm trying to not confuse things. So if we approve the budget without the track, budget's approved, we're done with the budget. We go back to the track item. And I think the action there would be the board declining to award the RFPs at this meeting, but giving staff and finance committee direction to bring a proposal back at the June 15th meeting.
So you would augment.
And then come June 15th, if the track's approved, then we can work
We
with
just
Courtney
augment.
and we'll revise the budget at the June meeting.
Courtney, does that have any impact on what you have to submit per state rules if we came back and did it later like that?
We have no issues with that. And the total amount stays the same, we're fine. If we need to augment, and change the amount, we have the ability to do augmentation. So as long as we have clarity on what I should submit in this first draft of the budget, then we're fine.
And you have to submit it by when?
End of this month.
Okay.
We gotta prove something.
Yeah.
Whether it's with the track. or
Because
without.
that goes to the state.
Correct.
Right.
And just to clarify, we're within the windows on the track bids of everything.
So we have until June 30th.
Okay.
Thank you.
And then can I just ask that prior to, like, a couple days prior to the June 15th meeting, that whatever the finance committee comes up with, that can we get those materials emailed a couple days before so we have time to review it prior to coming into the meeting?
Sure.
Sure.
Okay, and then somebody's gonna put that meeting on the calendar, right? Because I don't have that on my calendar yet.
Shannon, did you get it on the calendar?
I
You
I
get
didn't,
it?
was there I could only hear you, Jessica. Was there discussion from the board after I made the comment? I can't hear anyone.
I can't either.
Oh, okay. No, I don't have it on my calendar. Do you?
I don't.
Okay.
You still in the meeting?
I don't know, but they might all be able to hear us right now. Could have our own private meeting. I don't know what happened. I'll text Lisa.
I hope they're not voting on the budget without us.
Lisa just said they're working on it. All right, Jessica, they said that they're rebooting and they're taking a recess.
Okay, great. Thank you. Do
Yeah.
we need to reboot then or leave or?
Maybe we'll just stay on until they take a potty break, and then if she tells us to reboot, we can
Okay, thanks.
go take some Dayquil.
Yeah, I'm sick.
I just got over it a couple weeks ago.